Chapter 987. Tyre and Logue, who were deathly pale just a moment ago, suddenly became excited. Logue laughed and said, "All the hegemons are in Tanai. We killed them all in one fell swoop. Slank, Garp, the situation in the fringe has changed. We are only enduring this humiliation in order to wipe out the god hunters in one fell swoop. Do you understand our intentions now? 2/3 of my men are dead. What's the point of saying that?" Slank was shocked for a long while. But when he recalled that so many of his men had died and that Logue had indeed sacrificed them as cannon fodder, he no longer believed Logue's words. "Brian, the god hunter hegemons are done for and you have been avenged. We shouldn't be killing each other anymore. What we need to do now is to wipe out the god hunter survivors. What do you say?" Tyre seemed to have calmed down all of a sudden. He thought for a moment and immediately suggested to Han Shuo with a smile. As expected of an overgod who knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Seeing that Han Shuo's strength had exceeded their expectations, Tyre immediately changed his attitude and treated Han Shuo as an ally. Han Shuo, of course, knew what Tyre was thinking. He took a glance at Amphalos, the corners of his mouth curved into a cold smile, and said, "My celestial pearl pharmacy is still open and I still have many of my men working there. You didn't inform me beforehand and didn't let me evacuate my men. Now that Amphalos has exploded, all of my men are dead. Tell me, do you think I'll still be on your side after losing so many of my men? For the sake of victory in the fringe, sacrifices are unavoidable. Brian, you should be more open-minded." Tyre hurriedly said, "Why is it always others who are sacrificed? Why are your men safe and sound? Why aren't they the ones sacrificed?" The three whys came out of Han Shuo's mouth, each louder and louder than the last. Those were the thoughts of the leaders of the factions that were under Han Shuo and Logue's command. After Han Shuo's roar, they all started to condemn Tyre and Logue. "That's right. Why are you all fine? Why must we be sacrificed? Tyre, you don't care about other people's lives at all." Garp suddenly shouted, "Hee, Lord Logue is even more powerful. At critical moments, he can even sacrifice his loyal subordinates. Back in the bone-burying cave, when Lord Logue faced Ka's fatal blow, he grabbed a subordinate who had been with him for 300 years to block the blow, then took the opportunity to escape. They don't even care about their own people, let alone outsiders like us." Slank mocked after witnessing Rog's actions during the battle in the catacombs. After witnessing Han Shuo's power, Garp and Slank grew bolder. They believed that Tyre and Logue wouldn't be able to hurt them in the face of Han Shuo's terrifying power, so they vented all their pent-up frustrations. Garp and Slank weren't the only ones who were dissatisfied with Tyre and Logue. After Garp and Slank, more and more people started to condemn Tyre and Logue, accusing them of being disloyal. Even Logue's subordinates' eyes flickered after hearing Slank's words. It wasn't their first day following Logue, so they naturally knew how Logue did things. Thinking about it, wasn't what Slank said reasonable? In the past, the Fringe didn't have a king like Han Shuo who would wholeheartedly seek revenge for his subordinates. Without a leader like Han Shuo who treated his subordinates as his family, things were still fine. But now Tyre and Logue suddenly seemed so pathetic. "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Logue's expression changed. He suddenly realized that the eyes of his subordinates who used to be loyal to him were flickering. Logue felt that the situation wasn't looking good, but he was also afraid of Han Shuo, so he couldn't help but shout coldly. Logue had accumulated his authority for a long time. Seeing him lose his temper, the subordinates immediately lowered their heads. Slank and Garp weren't Logue's subordinates. With Han Shuo backing them up, they didn't care about Logue at all and continued to berate him loudly. "You're courting death." Logue's expression changed. He suddenly charged at Slank. Sinister death energy gathered around Garp and a bone cage wrapped around Slank. Han Shuo, who was coldly observing the situation below, already knew that Logue wouldn't be able to hold back. He sneered and released the combined energy of 6 elements, which covered Logue and Garp from above. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the bone cage wrapped around Slank suddenly exploded. The white bones scattered in all directions. A huge force descended from the sky and slammed into Logue. Logue couldn't dodge in time before this unstoppable force. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was flung far away. With a thought, the mystical power of a new domain of divinity engulfed Rog like a huge net, suddenly trapping him. His eyes flashed as Han Shuo noticed Tyre, who was retreating. He smirked. Tyre, I won't touch you for now. I'd like to see what you and Daka can do together. As soon as these words came out, Tyre's face was full of horror. He immediately shouted, What did you say? Isn't Daka your brother? Didn't you and Daka plan this? You wanted to work with Daka to get rid of the rest of the people in your way. Wasn't that your plan all along? Two experts who've reached the Overgod realm in the energy of destruction will definitely be terrifying when they work together. Didn't you want to use that power to turn the situation around? Han Shuo looked at Tyre coldly with a mocking smile. What? Tyre is colluding with Daka. Garp turned pale with fright. He stared incredulously at Tyre, who seemed to have been exposed. He said hatefully, No wonder. So it turns out that you, Tyre, are the ones who betrayed the Fringe. It wasn't just Slank and Garp. All the experts in the Fringe were enraged. No matter how they thought about it, they never expected Tyre to be brothers with Daka, the current leader of the God Hunters. What did that mean? It meant that Tyre had been a traitor all along. It meant that at least half of the reason why the Fringe was so weak was because of Tyre. Even the heavily injured and temporarily imprisoned Logue was in disbelief. He looked at Tyre and smiled bitterly. I see. Tyre, you're planning to work with your brother Daka to get rid of me, aren't you? That way, you'll be the undisputed #1 in the Fringe. No one will be able to threaten your position, right? Tyre, who was being pointed at by everyone, had an ugly expression on his face. He didn't say a word. You don't need to quibble. Daka will be here soon. The situation will be clear then. I'd like to see if you and Daka can really defeat me together. Han Shuo smirked as he turned to look into the distance. A figure streaked across the sky. Who else could it be but Daka? Tyre, what the hell are you doing? Why is only 1/5 of the Omphalos destroyed? And it's your side too. Daka yelled before he even arrived. Not all of the hegemons in the Omphalos were killed in the explosion. To Daka, it would be difficult to control the situation from here on out. His years of hard work had been destroyed in an instant. Daka didn't need Han Shuo to say anything else to prove that Tyre and Daka were brothers. Daka suddenly exclaimed in shock, Brian, why are you here? Daka immediately noticed Han Shuo. He had already witnessed Han Shuo's power back in Pandemonium. Now that he saw Han Shuo, he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Deep down, Daka was still a little afraid of Han Shuo. After all, the power Han Shuo displayed back in Pandemonium was just too overwhelming. Daka, I gave you guys a chance, but you didn't cherish it? Han Shuo put on a faint smile. Since you guys haven't left the Fringe, then don't leave. Han Shuo's expression turned cold as he glared at Tyre. What else do you have to say now that things have come to this? Brothers, as long as we kill Brian, the Fringe will be ours in the future. Tyre suddenly burst into laughter. He looked at his trusted aides who had followed him all these years but now seemed a little hesitant. That's right, Daka and I are indeed brothers. I did make use of others. But aren't all of you safe and sound? Everything I do is for our own good. In the future, you will see that I am the master of the Fringe and the God Hunter Alliance will never be a threat to us. Isn't that what we've been working towards? Tyre's words sounded extremely sincere. He was trying to use them to win back his subordinates' hearts. The eyes of those who had followed Tyre for many years flickered. They didn't immediately agree to continue the war with him, nor did they express any objections. All of them remained silent. Han Shuo only needed a single glance to know why they were silent. He smirked in his heart and suddenly said, The winner takes all. It all depends on this battle. Daka, Tyre, as long as you kill me, there won't be any problems. Your subordinates will still submit to you. Tyre was stunned for a moment. After thinking for a moment, he realized that this was indeed what his subordinates were thinking. If he and Daka were to be killed in the upcoming battle, his promise would be for naught. Big brother, let's kill Brian. If we work together, no one below the Overgod will be a match for us. Tyre said arrogantly, straightening his back. Daka, who was still hesitant at first, suddenly burst into laughter and said, "That's right. If we work together, no overgod without a quintessence would be a match for us." With that said, Daka and Tyre exchanged glances and suddenly surrounded Han Shuo from both sides. Daka and Tyre's destruction dominions strangely fused together. As they both cultivated in the energy of destruction and had the same bloodline, they were able to fuse their dominions just like Han Shuo. After the two dominions of destruction fused together, the two's destruction dominions skyrocketed and their auras skyrocketed. Any other overgod without a quintessence would find it hard to defend against the combined power of Tyre and Daka. However, for Han Shuo, who was able to fuse 6 different types of energy at the same time, his domain of divinity was 10 times more difficult than Daka and Tyre's. Of course, it was also 10 times more powerful. They were only fusing 2 types of energy, so how could they possibly be a match for Han Shuo? Sensing Daka and Tyre's destruction energy skyrocketing, Han Shuo's smirk never disappeared. When their destruction energy reached its peak, he roared, "Daka, Tyre, you two dare claim to be invincible among the overgods?" Destructive energy erupted from Han Shuo and spread out in all directions like a huge ripple. This terrifying energy had an incredibly powerful repulsive force that pushed Daka and Tyre's domain of divinity to the periphery and tore it apart. "I'm not even afraid of the overgods of death and light, so why would I be afraid of 2 small fries like you?" Another earth-shattering laughter rang out as an even more powerful energy shot out from the void illusion, splitting into 2 blinding beams of light that shot towards Daka and Tyre. With 2 blood-curdling screams, Tyre was completely enveloped by a bright light and was instantly brought into the strange space where Rog was imprisoned. Daka was terrified. The moment he heard Han Shuo's words, he fled without a care for anything else. He was hit by the shock wave of the powerful light and was drenched in blood. Daka didn't dare to look back at Han Shuo, nor did he care about his brother's fate. He endured the pain and ran for his life. "I'm not even afraid of the overgods of death and light anymore." Daka suddenly realized something when he heard Han Shuo's words. When they left Pandemonium, they knew that the overgod of death, Nestet, would definitely return to Pandemonium. The way they saw it, Han Shuo and his son would definitely be killed by Nestet. Yet Han Shuo was still alive and had even said such a thing. What did that mean? Daka felt a chill run down his spine when he thought about it. So, he decisively chose not to take Han Shuo's attack head-on like Tyre did. "Big brother." The heavily injured Tyre and Log were imprisoned together in that strange space. Apart from being unable to walk out or attack, Tyre's vision and voice weren't affected at all. Tyre shouted when he saw Daka fleeing without a care in the world. Daka clearly heard the sorrowful cry of "Big brother," but he didn't stop and continued running. Han Shuo looked at Daka's back coldly and smirked. "How smart of you! But do you really think you can escape?" Han Shuo didn't move because his consciousness had already sensed the aura of Little Skull Han Hao. Daka, who was running for his life, suddenly noticed someone standing in front of him. Looking closely, he realized that it was Han Hao, the little skull who possessed the quintessence shard. Daka made up his mind and roared, "You want to stop me? Your father hurt me, so I'll use you to pay him back." He gathered all the energy in his body and formed a gigantic orb of destruction that smashed towards Han Hao like a gray sun. Little Skull Han Hao stood proudly in front of Daka with his bone spear in hand. His eyes flashed with disdain as he said, "You deserve to die." As he said that, he raised his bone spear and a crystalline light shone from its tip. Evil, death, violence, and despair suddenly erupted from the center of the bone spear. In the face of such power, Daka's orb of destruction seemed so insignificant and fragile. Rumble! Rumble! Another earth-shattering explosion resounded as Daka's charge was stopped. Before he could react, the bone spear appeared in front of his eyes. Splat! The bone spear pierced through his eyes and nailed him in midair. In an instant, Daka's flesh and soul were absorbed by the bone spear. His despair, rage, and other negative emotions were affected by the new quintessence in Han Hao's body and turned into wisps of smoke that were swallowed by Han Hao, causing the light in Han Hao's eyes to grow brighter and brighter. Daka couldn't understand how Han Shuo and his son could reach such heights in just a few short days. How dare you destroy my home? You deserve to die. Pulling out the bone spear, Daka's iron-like divine body dissipated like dust. In the blink of an eye, Daka completely disappeared. Having lost all of his soul, he died a horrible death. After killing Daka, Han Hao didn't immediately head to Han Shuo's side. Instead, he sent a telepathic message. Father, I've killed Daka. I'm heading to the Amphalos now. Tanai still has a few hegemons there. I'm going to make sure none of them walk out of the fringe alive. Go, I'll be there in a moment, replied Han Shuo. Soon after, he looked at the temporarily imprisoned Logue and Tyre with a beaming smile and said, Tyre, your brother escaped before you, so you will die a little faster. If you can communicate telepathically, you should know that he's done for. Tyre, who was still hating Daka for not showing his brotherhood, was dumbfounded when he heard Han Shuo's words. Using the magical mirror to communicate with him, Tyre suddenly burst into laughter. Damn it. Let's die together. Suddenly, a powerful wave of destruction emanated from Tyre's body. A ball of light engulfed Tyre and Logue. The space that imprisoned Tyre and Logue trembled violently. Even Logue, who didn't want to die, couldn't avoid the shockwave. Tyre's divine body exploded along with his. Seeing Tyre commit suicide, Han Shuo immediately took action. He hurriedly removed the energy that imprisoned the two and tossed the cauldron of myriad demon out. Even if he couldn't collect the energy within their bodies, he wanted to at least obtain 2 pure divine souls. The divine consciousness of an overgod crystal was more precious than anything else. With Tyre's and Logue's divine souls, he could help the Han family members who cultivated in the energy of death and destruction to further understand the power of an overgod. With enough divine essences to increase the divine energy in their bodies, the Han family would have 2 more experts with overgod crystals. Fortunately, Han Shuo acted in time and the cauldron of myriad demon was truly powerful. Before the souls of Tyre and Tyre could collide with the light, the cauldron of myriad demon absorbed them and preserved their divine souls. When Tyre heard that Daka had been killed, he cursed himself and committed suicide. This made Han Shuo feel a little strange. He didn't know if it was because the two were brothers or if Tyre had no regrets after seeing Daka die first. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to escape from Han Shuo, he chose to commit suicide. Chapter 988. The 5 sovereigns had always been the protectors of the fringe. It was because of these 5 overgod experts that the fringe was able to maintain its transcendent status and not be threatened by the city lords of the dominions of space and destiny. The God Hunter Alliance did not dare to act rashly. Time flew by. 2 of the 5 sovereigns, Salis and Wasis, had steeled their hearts to stand with Han Shuo for various reasons. Asura, who was once on good terms with Han Shuo, had died by his hand. And now, Tyre and Logue, the 2 sovereigns who were ranked ahead of him, had died by Han Shuo's hands. In just 10 years, 3 of the 5 sovereigns had died and 2 had surrendered. From today onward, no one in the fringe would be able to threaten the Han family and Han Shuo's position in the fringe. The enormous void illusion formed by the fusion of the 6 energies returned to the cauldron of myriad demon. Han Shuo looked down disdainfully at the ferocious gods of the fringe and said indifferently, Tyre and Logue are dead. You may leave now. Slank, Garp, and the other leaders of the fringe looked at each other in astonishment when they heard Han Shuo's words. They stared blankly at Han Shuo, as though they did not understand what Han Shuo meant. After a long while, Slank bowed and respectfully said, The God Hunter Alliance is still wreaking havoc in the Amphalos. We should be under your command for the time being and help you in your crusade against the God Hunter Alliance. Why did you ask us to leave? Not only Slank, Garp, and the other scattered factions, but even Tyre and Logue's former subordinates were also puzzled. Based on their understanding of the sovereigns in the fringe, Han Shuo should have taken advantage of this opportunity to take them all under his command, thus gaining control of the most powerful forces in the fringe. Tyre, Logue, and the others had always done so. They couldn't understand why Han Shuo didn't do so. The corners of his mouth curved into a cold smirk as he looked down at the crowd below. The few from my pandemonium are more than enough to deal with the God Hunter Alliance. You don't need to waste your energy. The existence of the God Hunter Alliance is necessary. When they try to escape the fringe, you don't have to do your utmost to stop them. Just let them leave. After all, there are experts from other dominions waiting for them outside the fringe. What can we do? Slank looked rather ashamed after hearing Han Shua's words. He suddenly realized that they were as weak as ants in front of a peerless existence like Han Shua. The crisis of the God Hunter Alliance that engulfed the entire fringe didn't seem to concern Han Shua at all. What can all of you do? Han Shua smiled. After a short pause, he shook his head and said, all you have to do is to live well in the fringe. The Omphalos will settle down. As for those Omphalos shop owners who are hiding in the fringe, you just need to spread the word and let them return to the Omphalos after the storm is over. Upon finishing those words, Han Shua abruptly flew away and disappeared from their sight in an instant. From today onwards, there will no longer be any 5 sovereigns in the fringe. Slank stared blankly for a moment before he forced a smile and said, Lord Brian's achievements have far surpassed those of the 5 sovereigns. As long as he's in the fringe will always be his. That's good too. With one person ruling the fringe, at least there won't be endless wars. Garp thought for a moment before he suddenly laughed and said, no matter what, Lord Brian treats his people very well. If one day, we can become the guards of the Han family, that wouldn't be too bad. That's only possible if he takes a liking to us. Slank sighed and said, before the war, many people wanted to join the Han family but they didn't take a liking to any of them. At first, I thought that the House of Han didn't know how to appreciate favors. But now, I realize that they don't care about us at all. If it weren't for pandemonium, the fringe would have long since become the headquarters of the God Hunter Alliance. We must work hard and hope that Lord Brian will take a liking to us and become a member of the Han family. Garp nodded heavily. Han Shua's performance in dealing with Tyre and Log alone had won them over. They couldn't help but regard Han Shua as the strongest person in the fringe. While Garp and the others were talking, Han Shua appeared in the Omphalos. A loud explosion rocked the Omphalos. The area under Tyre's jurisdiction was obliterated. Many shops were turned into rubble in an instant and the ground caved in. All the God Hunters in the area and those who did not evacuate were killed. Only Tuckamore and Acer managed to survive, but they were severely injured and almost lost the ability to move. Tuckamore and Acer happened to be there when the explosion happened. The explosion came without warning and they couldn't dodge in time. They were instantly engulfed by the force of the explosion. Fortunately, the explosion only happened in one area of the Omphalos. If all 5 sovereigns in the Omphalos were to explode, the combined force of the explosion would affect each other tenfold. If that really happened, Tuckamore and Acer would have no chance of survival. They would probably be killed in an instant. When Han Shua arrived at the Omphalos, he saw that all the hegemons were evacuating from Tanai in a panic. The explosion from Tyre's area was too terrifying. They didn't know if the area under their feet would explode the next moment. They were all panic-stricken. Tuckamore, Acer, Regis, Isaiah, Miller, Belinton, and Cause were left with only 7 hegemons. Tuckamore and Acer were heavily injured, while Isaiah, Regis, and Miller hadn't fully recovered from their injuries in pandemonium. Only Belinton and Cause were still at their peak. Han Hao, wielding his bone spear, took the lead and stood in front of the 7 hegemons of the God Hunter Alliance, coldly facing off against them. Sinister negative energy leaked from his body. Unlike Nestet and the Goddess of Destiny, Han Hao's quintessence could no longer be concealed. The unstoppable energy emanating from him intimidated all 7 hegemons. Han Shua's arrival had thoroughly terrified the 7 hegemons. The young hegemon had already given them a tremendous amount of pressure. Now that the old hegemon had arrived, the last bit of confidence they had left in their hearts had vanished. Father, there are 7 of them, no one missing. Little Skeleton said softly when he saw Han Shua coming over. Han Shua nodded smilingly. He turned his gaze to the 7 people in front of him and said, Everyone, we meet again. The explosion at Omphalos was part of Daka and Tyre's plan. They buried 10,000 tons of energy crystals at the bottom of Omphalos, intending to kill all of you in one fell swoop. Hee, it's a good thing I came prepared and let you live until now. The 7 hegemons didn't have much confidence in facing Han Shuo now. Their subordinates were scattered all over the place, and if they were to run away now, they wouldn't be able to survive in their own divine dominions. Especially when half of them were injured, they really didn't know what to do against Han Shuo. What do you want? Isaiah hung his head dejectedly. The lofty aspirations he had when he came to the fringe had been erased. All he wanted now was to get as far away from this place as possible with his subordinates. He hoped that he would never see Han Shuo again. What do I want? Han Shuo stroked his chin and put on a sinister smirk. With one thought, his 6 avatars combined into one and unleashed a power that could look down on all living things. It formed an enormous glass canopy that enveloped the remaining 7. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. You even dared to stay in the fringe and commit atrocities. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being rude. Han Shuo laughed heartily and started shrinking the glass canopy like an eggshell, squeezing the 7 hegemons in the center. Of the 7 hegemons, only Belinton and Kaz could use their full strength. Tuckamore and Acer were heavily injured and didn't have the strength to fight back. Isaiah and the other 2 were still injured, having been beaten up by Han Shuo in Pandemonium. Now that they were facing Han Shuo again, they had less than 70% of their strength left. How could they possibly be a match for Han Shuo with their current strength? Not to mention, Han Shuo had a little skull with a quintessence by his side. Given Han Shuo and his son's current strength, unless they ran into an overgod with a quintessence, they wouldn't be a match for them on Elysium. You dare kill us? Kaz, a hegemon who cultivated in the Edict of Life, seemed to know some secrets. He shrieked, "We hegemons have existed since time immemorial. Even the 12 quintessence overgods have tacitly acknowledged our existence and refrained from attacking us. You dare?" When the goddess of destiny arrived at Pandemonium, she had vaguely revealed some information about the God-Hunter Alliance. It seemed that the existence of the God-Hunters was indeed necessary, which was why the 12 overgods didn't attack them. Even when the goddess of destiny's partner was killed by the God-Hunters, she didn't exterminate all God-Hunters. That was enough to prove that the God-Hunters had a special meaning. Why wouldn't I dare? Han Shuo put on a carefree smile and clenched his hand. Kaz's bones cracked and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face contorted in pain. Hee, you seem to know something, don't you? Han Shuo nodded and laughed. Very good, very good. Since I can't learn anything from the goddess of destiny, it seems that I can learn something from you. Upon finishing those words, Han Shuo summoned the cauldron of myriad demon and enveloped Kaz within it. While refining Kaz's divine soul with the cauldron, Han Shuo gathered the energy of his 6 elemental fusion and avatars to surround and kill the remaining 6 hegemons. He muttered, "The existence of God-Hunters is necessary. I won't exterminate all God-Hunters. I only want you hegemons to die and use your divine souls to fuel the power of my Han family." As he spoke, Han Shuo gathered all of his energy into a single point and released it. With the crisp sound of eggshells cracking, the bodies of the hegemons exploded and their divine souls flew into the cauldron of myriad demon that was refining Kaz's soul. Chapter 989. Surrounded by the cauldron of myriad demon, Kaz's divine soul was like a candle flickering in the wind, flickering erratically. Given the realm of Han Shuo's consciousness and the cauldron of myriad demon's power to manipulate Kaz's divine soul, Han Shuo was able to extract all of Kaz's experiences from the moment he was born. He could even extract memories that Kaz couldn't remember from the depths of Kaz's soul. Only memories that existed couldn't escape Han Shuo's great soul-searching art. Han Shuo's consciousness spread across Kaz's mind like a giant net. Threads of his consciousness wrapped around Kaz's divine soul and dug out everything from the depths of his memories. Kaz cultivated in the energy of life. At his realm, he had already escaped the fate of life and death. In his long life, he had experienced many things that left a deep impression on him. It would take Han Shuo at least a day or two to comb through all of Kaz's memories. After all, Cuz had lived for nearly 10,000 years and had experienced many things every single day. His memory was as vast as the ocean, and it wouldn't be that easy to sort through. Han Shuo, on the other hand, wasn't interested in the trifling matters of Ka's life. He wasn't a pervert who liked to pry into other people's privacy. Therefore, Han Shuo focused on the most important part of Ka's memories. Han Shuo didn't even need to think to know that those were the most important memories in the depths of Ka's soul. Memories that he often thought about were much clearer than those of his daily life. Soon enough, Han Shuo found what he was looking for. Han Shuo's consciousness enveloped this deep memory and used the great soul-searching art to retrieve it in his sea of consciousness. This memory happened a few hundred years ago, not too far from the present. At that time, Kuz had yet to become an overgod or become a god hunter. He was the patriarch of a major family clan in the Life Dominion. As the patriarch of a major family clan in the Life Dominion, not only was he not a god hunter, but he was also a hunter who hated god hunters to the core. While fighting against the god hunters in the Life Dominion, Kuz was betrayed by a cousin of his and was imprisoned by the god hunters in a gorge called Tanai. Within 15 minutes, all of Ka's clansmen were slaughtered by the god hunters. Ka's wife and son were not spared. Kaz, on the other hand, was stopped by the hegemon of the Life Dominion. He could only watch helplessly as his wife was raped and his son was dismembered. It was an unforgettable memory. Back then, the hegemon was merely a late-stage high god while Kaz was merely an early-stage high god. He was no match for the hegemon and could only endure the humiliation for the rest of his life. Prior to this, Kuz had hunted down god hunters in every city in the Life Dominion and was their greatest enemy. The former hegemon of the Life Dominion captured Kaz and learned a few things about god hunters from the hegemon of the Life Dominion. That hegemon once told Kaz that god hunters were an indispensable part of Elysium. The existence of every god on Elysium possessed too much elemental edictal energy. If the number of gods on Elysium exceeded a certain limit, the energy of heaven and earth would change. Such a change would affect the quintessence over gods and seem to be very detrimental to the quintessence. Therefore, the hegemon told Kaz that god hunters would never disappear from Elysium because their existence would reduce the number of gods on Elysium every day. It would effectively prevent such a situation from happening. For the quintessence over gods, the god hunters were actually helping them eliminate some of the hidden dangers. He rejected all of Kaz's previous actions, saying that Kaz's previous actions were idiotic and that the Life Dominions over God just wanted him to fight the god hunters endlessly. It didn't matter if the god hunters died or their loyal subordinates were killed, it wasn't a bad thing for the quintessence over gods. In the end, Kuz didn't die. The divine guards of every major city in the Life Dominion arrived just in time. Kaz, who had lost a portion of his divine energy, was lucky enough to survive. Having lost most of his divine energy, Kaz's strength was greatly reduced. When he returned to his family, he found that his cousin who had betrayed him had replaced him as the new patriarch. Having lost a portion of his divine energy, Kaz was no longer a match for his cousin. He was defeated and chased out of his family. After his wife and children were killed and his cousin betrayed him, Kaz's personality changed drastically. He abandoned his faith in the overgod of life. For the sake of revenge, Kaz suddenly became the craziest god hunter. He started by devouring the weakest gods and recovered his divine energy bit by bit. After more than 100 years, Kaz killed his cousin and slaughtered all the members of his family who had betrayed him. In the end, even the former hegemon of the Life Dominion couldn't escape from Kaz's hands. Kaz used the most insidious method to burn his soul with poisonous flames. It took him more than 200 years to exhaust the last bit of energy in his soul. He only died after suffering for 200 years. Afterward, Kaz, who had lost his faith, became the new hegemon of the Life Dominion. His strength soared and he ascended to the realm of Overgod. Han Shuo took a deep breath and carefully stored Kaz's divine soul. He imprisoned it in a special corner of the cauldron of Myriad Demon and used the power of the cauldron to remove the impurities in Kaz's divine soul, leaving only the purest comprehension of the Edict of Life for Han Mu to absorb. Sigh, what a pitiful man, sighed Han Shuo. Han Shuo let out a soft sigh. After learning about Ka's experiences from his memories, Han Shuo no longer felt any hatred for Ka's. He felt that Ka's life was truly pitiful. He also understood Ka's desperation to become a god hunter. In that situation, it was almost impossible for Ka, who had lost most of his divine power, to use his original path to avenge his wife and child. Everything that mattered to him in his life was taken away. Even the faith he had built up over many years had crumbled in an instant. It was only natural that his personality would undergo a drastic change. "Father, he said that there is a need for god hunters to exist? Really?" When Little Skull saw that Han Shuo had sent his consciousness into Ka's mind, he knew that Han Shuo could easily obtain all of Ka's memories. Han Shuo nodded and sneered. Too many gods will occupy too much of the energy of the 12 elements. When a certain element is occupied too much by a god, the god of that element will undergo a mutation. Such a mutation is very bad for the overgods who possess the quintessence. Therefore, they need to maintain a delicate balance. At this point, Han Shuo suddenly recalled the war of the gods mentioned by the goddess of destiny and the god of light. He wondered if there was a reason for the war of the gods. According to the god of light and the goddess of destiny, a war of the gods would definitely occur before the opening of Eternia. Many gods would die during the war. Could their deaths be a necessary procedure for the opening of Eternia? On Elysium, every once in a while, a great war would break out that would engulf all of the dominions. Many geniuses would perish in those wars before they could truly become top experts. During the most crucial moments, the goddess of destiny would appear and calm the wars. Previously, Han Shuo didn't understand why such a thing would happen and why the goddess of destiny would wait for many years before resolving the war. But now that he had learned these secrets from Ka's memories, Han Shuo had his own guesses and vaguely understood some things. Balance? Little Skull stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly asked, "Father, are you saying that the existence of the god hunters is tacitly approved by the 12 overgods? You have seen the power of Nestet and Judas. Any one of them could wipe out all the god hunters in the 12 dominions. Also, Andrina said that the goddess of destiny's lover died at the hands of the god hunters and that Andrina nearly died from exhaustion of the energy of her soul. However, even with such deep-rooted hatred, the goddess of destiny didn't wipe out all the god hunters. I believe that Ka's words are believable. Other than the existence of the god hunters, I really don't know any other reason why they wouldn't wipe out the god hunters," said Han Shuo in a deep voice. "Does that mean that the 12 quintessence overgods won't meddle in my business even if I unite the god hunters?" asked Han Hao after a moment of silence. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. "That's right. As long as what you do is in line with their interests, they won't interfere." Han Shuo thought for a moment before he said, "However, the power of faith from the living gods in the 12 dominions is also very useful to the overgods. They need the faith of those gods, but at the same time, they don't want their numbers to be too large. It's like a scale, seeking a delicate balance. You shouldn't act too recklessly, or the 12 overgods might attack together. We are not their match for the time being, so we have to be careful." "Understood, Father. I'll be careful." Han Hao nodded in understanding. It was at this moment that 2 whistles sounded from the distance. After a short while, Salis and Wasis appeared before Han Shuo. Salis, who had no idea what was happening, hastily reported, "Brian, many divine guards from the 12 dominions have gathered and are heading towards the fringe. It seems that they are planning to attack the god hunters and us." Han Shuo nodded and said, "If they want to maintain a delicate balance, the god hunter alliance can't be too powerful. With the 12 dominions, the number of god hunters in the alliance might be a little too much for them to handle. They are probably planning to purge the alliance, right?" "Father, what should we do?" asked Han Hao. Han Shuo bunched his brows as he looked at the god hunters who had lost their 7 hegemons and were looking at him with fear. He smiled and said, "You are the new leader of the god hunters. You can decide what to do. I think the most important thing is to subdue them." "I understand." Little Skeleton nodded and began to organize the god hunters around him. It was impossible for Han Shuo to spend too much energy on the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, Nor could he waste too much time on refining medicinal pellets. Therefore, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy must have pharmacists who could truly hold the fort. The talented pharmacists of the Amphalos were exactly what Han Shuo lacked the most. With them joining the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, Han Shuo would truly have no worries in the future. Father, Han Jin and Andrina walked over from the Amphalos. Their clothes were ragged and there were traces of dust on their faces. They seemed to have been affected by Tanai's explosion. Are you two all right? Han Shuo immediately cried out in alarm. He was the one who arranged for Han Jin and Andrina to stop the explosion in the Amphalos. He did not expect that the Amphalos would explode. Although they were special life forms, Han Shuo was still rather worried. I'm fine, replied Han Jin smilingly. He glanced at the radiant Andrina and smilingly said, not only are we fine, but we also benefited from it. The explosion did not harm us at all. Instead, it allowed our bodies to gather a lot of energy. Han Shuo's face lit up. He discreetly probed Han Jin and Andrina's physical condition with his consciousness. Sure enough, he discovered that the energy in their bodies seemed to be much more profound than before. Han Shuo nodded smilingly and said, not bad at all. I knew that you two would be fine. Given your special life forms and bodies, the explosion of the energy crystals would only benefit you too. After a short pause, Han Shuo asked, did Tyre set up something else in his area? Yes, Tyre is indeed treacherous. Every area in the Amphalos has a special energy device that can receive instructions from his divine soul. But in his area, he set up 3 more energy devices. They are all hidden in very well hidden places. There are even special boundaries on them that conceal the slightest energy undulations. Before we could set them up, Tyre had already released the signal of the explosion. That's why we couldn't stop it, explained Andrina. Father, I'm sorry. We couldn't stop the explosion in that area, apologized Han Jin. You guys have done well enough. Naturally, Han Shuo wouldn't blame them. He turned to Wasis and said, have your men from Glacial Peak head to the Pandemonium first. I'm worried that the God Hunter Alliance isn't the only target of the 12 Dominions. Wasis's expression slightly changed. He nodded and left without saying a word. A magical mirror suddenly appeared in his hand. He was communicating with his subordinates in a remote corner. Salus, the Empyrean Peak will belong to you in the future. There are still many scattered factions in the fringe. With your strength, recruit as many as you can. I have more than enough people on my side. I won't allow them to join the Han family. Those from the 12 Dominions might come. Use this opportunity to subdue them. Anyone who belongs to you can seek refuge in the Pandemonium, promised Han Shuo to Salus with a smile. Salus was overjoyed. Chapter 991. Apart from Han Shuo, Wasis and Salus were also stationed in Hexopolis. Wasis had already sent word that his subordinates would head to the Pandemonium to seek refuge. Salus, on the other hand, made use of this time to roam around Hexopolis and meet with the leaders of the various factions. Han Shuo clearly stated that the Han family would not want him and that the fringe would be jointly managed by him, Salus, and Wasis. It was only after Han Shuo's message was sent out that the leaders of the various factions who didn't take Salus seriously considered his proposal. A few leaders who knew that they weren't strong enough and that they wouldn't be able to strut around even if the fringe returned to normal accepted Salus's sincere invitation to serve under him. Han Shuo purged the divine souls of the God Hunter hegemons from the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, leaving behind only the purest understanding of the profound mysteries of energy. He made a few profound orbs and had Han Jin and Andrina bring them to the Pandemonium. In this battle, Han Shuo captured all the God Hunter hegemons in one fell swoop. Daka, Tyre, Logue, Acer, Tuckamore, Sant, Regis, Miller, Belinton, and Cause made from the souls of Tuckamore, Cause, and Belinton. Naturally, Han Shuo, Han Hua, and Han Mu's profound orbs were given to Han Hua, Han Mu, and Han Shui. Other than Han Hua, Han Mu, and Han Shui, Akeley received a destruction orb from Tyre's divine soul. Fanny would receive Logue's pure divine soul orb of death, while Emily would naturally receive Asur's darkness orb. There were also destruction orbs made from Daka's divine soul, earth orbs made from Isaiah's divine soul, lightning orbs made from Regis's, and wind orbs made from Miller's. Han Shuo also handed them to Han Jin, indicating for Han Jin to use them on his family members. The fact that Han Jin was able to become the owner of Goldstone meant that he wasn't any less intelligent than Little Skull Han Hao. Ever since he befriended Andrina, he had been evolving at a rapid pace. Han Shuo felt at ease leaving such an important item in Han Jin's hands. After Han Jin and Andrina left, Han Shuo settled down in Fringe Hexopolis. He spread the news that people from all over the Fringe were coming to the Land of Chaos, and at the same time, he came up with new rules for Fringe Hexopolis. With the full support of Wasis and Salis, Han Shuo became the undisputed #1 person in Fringe Hexopolis. Imitating some of the rules of Ethereal City and the City of Shadows, Han Shuo came up with a new set of rules. Han Shuo vetoed all the tyrannical rules of Amphalos. From now on, Fringe Hexopolis would become the true center of the Fringe. Gods who entered Fringe Hexopolis would no longer have to pay black crystal coins and could stay as long as they wanted. The God Hunter War that had engulfed the Fringe had caused a sharp decline in the population of the Fringe. Many of the Fringe dwellers who used to live in the Fringe had either been slaughtered by the God Hunters or had temporarily left the Fringe to seek refuge in remote and desolate places. As the Fringe was now sparsely populated, Han Shuo had come up with many favorable measures and new rules to restore the Fringe as soon as possible. It took Han Shuo a few days to come up with the new rules of Fringe Hexopolis. After everything was back on track, Han Shuo cultivated in the secret room beneath Celestial Pearl that Earth Elite Zombie had opened up for him. Ever since Han Shuo made a breakthrough in his state of mind during the battle at Pandemonium, he discovered that the 13 avatars formed from the demon generals and various energies in the demonic cauldron were incredibly powerful. A single avatar might not be as powerful as an overgod without the quintessence, but when two avatars fused, they would be even more powerful than an overgod without the quintessence like Tyre. Although the new avatars formed from the fusion of 6 energies weren't as powerful as an overgod with the quintessence, they were still terrifyingly powerful. So-called pseudo-overgods like Tyre and Log couldn't even put up the slightest resistance against them. Judging from the strength of the new avatars, if all 13 were successfully fused, Han Shuo believed that even an overgod with the quintessence wouldn't necessarily be a match for him. Every time he thought of this possibility, Han Shuo would get a little excited. Judging from the current situation, it wasn't impossible to fuse the 13 energies together. Unfortunately, the fusion of 6 energies was Han Shuo's limit. During this period of time, Han Shuo had been trying to see if he could fuse the other 7 avatars, but he just couldn't find the right opportunity to do so. He had tried fusing the other 7 energies once, but he still couldn't fuse them together. This gave Han Shuo quite a headache. Han Shuo sat cross-legged in the underground secret room. The 6 avatars of destruction, death, darkness, lightning, wind, and water gradually overlapped with each other. As soon as the 2 energies fused together, the 6 energies were like 6 streams flowing together. They immediately strengthened and formed a new energy. Han Shuo took a deep breath and continued to fuse the energy of light with the energy of the 6 elements. However, he discovered that as soon as his avatar of light approached the source of the fused energy, it would be repelled by a force. Han Shuo wasn't in a hurry. As he tried repeatedly, he used his consciousness to carefully feel for the reason. Gradually, Han Shuo discovered that the energy of light was being repelled by a very distinct energy of darkness. That energy of darkness in his avatar that had fused with 6 elemental energies had become abnormally powerful. It seemed to be on the verge of breaking away from the state of fusion. Han Shuo tried many times, but every time, he discovered that the fused energy of darkness would repel the newly added energy of light. After many fruitless attempts, he had no choice but to give up and start experimenting with other energies. After the energy of light, Han Shuo tried the other 6 energies: fire, life, space-time, fate, fighting aura, and earth. Among them, the energy of fire repelled the energy of water, and the energy of life repelled the energy of death. Only the four energies of space-time, fate, earth, and fighting aura did not feel this kind of repulsion. However, there were no signs of fusion. Light and darkness opposed each other. Death and life opposed each other. Water and fire were incompatible. These six energies seemed to be natural enemies. It seemed as though there was no possibility of them fusing. Han Shuo thought about it carefully for a while. He felt that these six energies might not be difficult to fuse, but it should be rather difficult. Thinking about it this way, Han Shuo felt that he should spend more effort on fusing space-time, fate, earth, and fighting aura. Among these four energies, there were some special types of fighting aura that seemed to be the easiest to deal with. When he fused his fighting aura with his avatar, Han Shuo vaguely felt a little comfortable. Although he couldn't fuse it with his avatar for the time being, he felt that the fusion of fighting aura should be the easiest. Han Shuo spent a dozen or so days meditating in silence. During this period of time, Han Shuo did not make any breakthroughs. However, he had a clear direction. He planned to spend more time and effort on the four energies of space, destiny, earth, and fighting aura, especially the energy of fighting aura. As for light, fire, and life, Han Shuo felt that he should leave them for last. It was obvious that fusing these three energies would be extremely difficult. It was still unknown whether or not he could fuse them. One day, Han Shuo came out from his meditation. He went to Wasis and Salis and asked them to bring all the scattered people into Hexopolis. Han Shuo's powerful consciousness could sense that the divine guards from the 12 divine dominions were about to arrive at Hexopolis. "Brian, how many are there?" Salis bunched his brows and appeared rather worried. "More than the God Hunter Alliance," replied Han Shuo calmly. He shot a glance at Salis and said, "But you don't have to worry. Numbers won't change anything. I'd like to see what they can do to me." As long as Han Shuo was in the fringe, the connection between him and Little Skull Han Hao would not disappear. Han Shuo had communicated with Little Skull a few days ago when the connection was about to be severed. From Little Skull Han Hao, Han Shuo learned that the God Hunter Alliance did not suffer too great a loss and had left the fringed. The information from Little Skull Han Hao allowed Han Shuo to learn about the number of divine guards from the 12 divine dominions. However, Han Shuo did not pay too much attention to it. He only remembered one of them, the Keeper of Light, Jar. Among the leaders of the expedition to the fringe was McKinley, the city lord of Ethereal City who was closest to the fringe. He was one of Han Shuo's closest friends and had communicated with Han Shuo before he came. Therefore, Han Shuo was well aware of the movements of the fringe. "Brian, Jar has also come. If possible, I hope you can help me get rid of Jar." In the magical mirror, McKinley wore an indignant face and said hatefully, "Jar has actually broken through to the Overgod realm. Jar is the one leading the expedition against the God Hunters and the Fringe. Sigh, I'm still no match for Jar. I've been mocked and ridiculed by Jar along the way. I know that I'm no match for him, but I can only endure it." In the magical mirror, McKinley kept complaining to Han Shuo about Jar, one of the 3 keepers of light. Han Shuo felt some sympathy for McKinley. He had been sealed away by Jar for so many years, and yet he was still no match for him. Not only that, he had no choice but to participate in the expedition against the Fringe and the God Hunter Alliance. Coincidentally, he had run into Jar. Not only could he not avenge Jar, he even had his dignity trampled on. One could imagine the indignation in McKinley's heart. Jar, one of the 3 keepers of light, was fiercely loyal to the God of Light. Back in Pandemonium, the God of Light had vaguely warned Han Shuo not to touch Jar. However, Han Shuo, who had always disliked the Temple of the God of Light back on Profound Continent, had never considered the God of Light a friend. This time was no exception. The corners of Han Shuo's mouth curled into a sneer as he watched the 12 great divine guards gradually approaching him. Chapter 992. Outside the Hexopolis, the experts from the 12 dominions had finally arrived. They were temporarily gathered at the peak of a barren mountain, observing from afar and discussing in low voices from time to time. McKinley wore a dark face. From time to time, his eyes would glance at Jar, who was dressed in the elder robes of the Temple of God of Light and had a white beard. He saw Jar laughing and chatting with the chiefs of divine guards. As one of the 3 keepers of light under the command of the god of light, Jar possessed outstanding strength and was very active among the chiefs of divine guards. Apart from Yaris from the dominion of darkness and a few leaders from the dominions of death and destruction, the others were a little wary of Gil. The dominions of god of light, life, and water had always been at odds with the dominions of death, destruction, and darkness. They would often have small frictions, and they were even sworn enemies during the War of the Gods. Normally, it would have been impossible for them to work together given their antagonistic relationship. However, the God Hunter Alliance was too much of a threat. With so many experts from various divine dominions here, it was inevitable that Gil and Yaris would run into each other. Jar and Yaris almost started fighting as soon as they saw each other. Although they managed to control their emotions, they seemed to mind their own business. There was a clear distinction between the 2 parties, and they looked at each other with ferocious gazes. Judging from the current situation, once the war between the God Hunter Alliance and the Fringe was over, it was highly likely that the 6 factions led by Gil and Yaris would start a war in the Fringe over the slightest disagreement. Jar and his party were in one area, while Yaris and his party were in another. Meanwhile, McKinley stood by himself. From time to time, Jar would mock him for his incompetence. Hexopolis. Suddenly, Jar, who was in the distance, sneered. He looked at the 4 big words that Han Shua had erected on the boulder and sneered, "He changed his name? He's going to be razed to the ground soon, and he actually changed his name at this time. This person is really interesting." Jar put on a smile, turned to McKinley and said, "McKinley, do you think those from the God Hunter Alliance have killed that so-called friend of yours? As far as I know, that youngster named Brian has a pretty good relationship with you. You have been taking special care of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City. Furthermore, you cultivate in the Edict of Space. If he is still alive, you two should be in contact, right?" No comment. McKinley snorted coldly and turned his head away, ignoring Jar. "McKinley, oh McKinley, Ethereal City is right next to the Fringe and yet you know nothing about it. I really don't know how you managed to become the City Lord of Ethereal City." Jar shot a glance at McKinley and mocked. "Brian won't be killed that easily. If he is really in the Fringe, Jar, do you dare to fight him alone?" Yaris suddenly sneered and teased Jar. Jar stared blankly for a moment as though he did not expect Yaris to say that. After thinking for a moment, Jar chuckled and said, "I heard that Brian had been to the City of Gorging Clouds. You, Darkwater, and Darkstone seem to have joined forces to deal with him. Unfortunately, it seems that you all suffered a loss." Jar suddenly smiled and shook his head. He mumbled to himself, "Yaris, it seems that not only have you not improved over the years, you have even regressed. To think that even the 3 city lords of your darkness dominion couldn't handle a nameless youngster. Or perhaps I have overestimated you." Yaris wasn't angry at all. The corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile as he instigated, "If we really meet Brian later, why don't you deal with him yourself? No matter who it is, we can still share some of the burden with you." Jar didn't put Han Shua in his eyes at all. He sneered and said, "That youngster isn't worthy for me to deal with him personally. Once he proves his strength, I'll play with him." I really want to see how you're going to play with Brian if he really shows up." Yaris grinned and waved his hand. He said, "Let's go. We're already at the entrance. It's time for us to go in." "Yaris, does that Brian really have that kind of strength?" Talbot, the city lord of the City of Wraiths, suddenly asked in a low voice. Talbot was the city lord of the City of Wraiths in the Death Dominion. Han Shua had killed Portlam in the City of Wraiths and declared that he wasn't afraid of anyone's vengeance. Talbot hesitated and didn't dare to make a move on Han Shua. This time, under Yaris's invitation, he personally came to the Fringe to demand an explanation. Yaris's face turned solemn. He said in a low voice, "Brian has never been active in the dominion of God of Light. It's only natural that Jar doesn't know his strength. But in the Death and Darkness dominions, Brian has fought many times. His strength shouldn't be any weaker than yours, right? If he wasn't strong enough, Darkwater, Darkstone, and I would have killed him back in the city of gorging clouds. Are you sure you can defeat him this time? Talbot's expression changed slightly and his voice became even softer. Yaris shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Not yet. Even with the help of the two of you, I still can't see through him. However, Jar and the others don't know Brian's strength. If he's still in the fringe, we'll let Jar take the lead. Once Jar and the others are heavily injured, we'll retreat from the fringe and deal with Jar and the others." Yaris used the energy of darkness to form a barrier around the two of them. Even the people around them wouldn't know what they were talking about, let alone Jar. Brian can seriously injure Jar? Talbot was shocked once more. "Just you wait and see." Yaris smiled mysteriously and said in a low voice, "Remember, if Brian shows up and shows his strength, we must leave the fringe immediately and ambush Jar and the others. I've already communicated with the Overgod before I came here. He said that the war of the gods is inevitable and we should strike first." After a while, the divine guards from the 12 dominions finally gathered around the giant boulder that had the words Fringe Hexopolis carved on it. Jar let out a long laugh and shouted, "It doesn't matter if the people inside are god hunters or prisoners of the fringe, they all deserve to die. Today, the holy light of God of Light shall shine upon this filthy place and bring new light to the fringe." Asterisk creak. Asterisk behind the boulder, the gates of the Fringe Hexopolis opened. A loud and clear laughter sounded from within. "Ha, I've been waiting for you all for a long time. You are my guests from afar." "Oh, and McKinley and Yaris. Very good, very good. They're all acquaintances. Who are you?" Jar asked in a loud voice after hearing the unfamiliar voice. Those from other divine dominions were also puzzled. They had no idea what was going on inside, but they felt that something was amiss. Most god hunter hegemons were middle-aged or elderly. They had never heard of such a young hegemon before. Yaris' face jolted. He hesitated for a moment before he shot a glance at Talbot. He forced a smile and said, "I didn't expect you to be the master of the fringe. Since you have invited me, I'm here to ask for a cup of wine. But let me make it clear that our target in coming to the fringe is the god hunters, not you. Don't misunderstand." "Brian? You're that Brian?" Jar immediately realized who the owner of the voice was after hearing Yaris' words. He hesitated for a moment. Jar had a bad feeling about this and hesitated. Who was the one who said that a certain someone wasn't qualified for him to fight? What's wrong? We haven't even come in yet and you're already afraid? McKinley, who had been holding back all this while suddenly straightened his back and shouted, "Shut up." Jar's face jolted. He shot a cold glance at McKinley and said, "Loser. Since when did you have the right to mock me?" After saying those words, Jar let out a groan, signaled to the others with his eyes, and walked into the fringe. The others followed closely behind him. Yaris put on a strange smile. He could tell with one glance that Jar was a little scared. Tanai's absence of the God Hunter Alliance was enough to prove that the God Hunters had been defeated. To be able to drive the God Hunter Alliance out of the fringe, the strength of the Master of the Fringe was indescribable. "Talbot, be careful. The Divine Guards should stay outside for the time being. Our goal is different from that of Jar and the others. There's no need for us to get involved in this mess. If the situation changes, we will leave immediately." Yaris reminded Talbot as they walked towards the Omphalos. Talbot, who had solemnly vowed to seek revenge on Han Shua, grew more and more uncertain after hearing Yaris' words. His strength was inferior to Yaris, but for even Yaris to be so fearful of Han Shua, Talbot's confidence gradually diminished. He gradually lost the will to fight to the death with Han Shua. The party slowly walked into the Omphalos that had been renamed Hexopolis. McKinley was the only one who wasn't afraid of Han Shua. As he was on good terms with Han Shua, it was only natural that he knew that Han Shua wouldn't harm him. Therefore, he was the first to enter the Omphalos. As soon as McKinley entered the Omphalos, he saw Han Shua standing with his hands clasped behind his back. Beside Han Shua were Salis and Wasis. Other than Han Shua, Salis, and Wasis, there was no one else in the spacious street. All three of them had smiles on their faces. Han Shua wore a gentle smile, Salis wore a faint smile, and Wasis wore a cold smile. McKinley did not talk too much with Han Shuo. He merely nodded and shot a meaningful glance at Han Shuo, indicating to him which one was Jar. Han Shuo didn't need McKinley's hint. With his current strength and means, he had long figured out who Jar was. Han Shuo smiled and nodded, indicating that he knew what was going on and not to worry. Chapter 993. You're Brian? You've got guts at such a young age, said Jar with a sneer. Long time no see. I didn't expect that you would become the master of the Omphalos in the fringe. Yaris wore a solemn expression. Not only did he keep his distance from Gil, he also kept his distance from Han Shuo. Han Shuo ignored Jar and looked at Yaris with a smile. He was rather puzzled. Han Shuo had killed Yaris' brother Larixin with his own hands. Back in the city of Gorging Clouds, Han Shuo had also slaughtered a lot of people. Han Shuo did not expect Yaris to show that he wasn't here for revenge. Larixin was killed by me. You said that you came to the fringe to deal with the God Hunter Alliance? Asked Han Shuo with his brows bunched. He stared at Yaris and asked, Is that true? Yaris's heart tightened as he nodded with a bitter smile. Believe it or not, I really don't intend to seek revenge on you this time. He had received some instructions from the Overgod of Darkness a long time ago. No matter how unwilling he was, he didn't dare to go against the Overgod's will. Where are those from the God Hunter Alliance? Asked Jar after he saw that Han Shuo wasn't paying attention to him. This time, Han Shuo finally turned his gaze to him. He couldn't help but recall the advice the God of Light had given him. After carefully observing Jar for a while, Han Shuo discovered that Jar was a fanatical believer of a religion. Jar had the kind of obsession that only a fanatic could have. His fanaticism would only serve the God of Light. Although Jar was wearing a pure white elder's robe, he didn't seem calm at all. On the contrary, he seemed fierce and irascible. Just as McKinley had said, Jar wasn't born on Elysium but on an unknown plane. He used to be a fanatical believer of the God of Light. Jar's strength continued to grow by leaps and bounds. His fanatical faith in the God of Light eventually attracted the attention of the God of Light, who bestowed upon him a mark of God of Light. Gil's strength improved by leaps and bounds under the influence of the divine seal from the God of Light, becoming the first mid-god of that lesser plane to cultivate the energy of light. His achievements astonished the God of Light. The God of Light dispatched him to various major planes to wage war. Jar never let the God of Light down. He eradicated all the heretics on more than a dozen planes big and small, expanding the influence of the God of Light to many planes. Jar eventually arrived on Elysium under the guidance of the God of Light. Jar never disappointed the God of Light. He cultivated to high godhood in just 500 years and became a dazzling new star in the God of Light's domain. There were many legends about Jar. Everyone knew that Jar was an oddball. He was never one who excelled in crafty plots and schemes. Instead, he relied on his extraordinary, fanatical strength to defeat all his enemies. He was the most violent and radical of the three Keepers of Light. A series of Jar's deeds flashed through Han Shuo's mind. Han Shuo thought to himself that Jar was a genius. He thought that only a person who dedicated himself to the God of Light and spared no effort in carrying out the will of the God of Light would be appreciated by the God of Light. The God of Light had even personally warned Han Shuo not to touch Jar. Didn't you run into him on your way here? Han Shuo put on a faint smile and said, We have driven the God Hunter Alliance out of the fringe. There are no God Hunters left in the fringe. Everyone, if you came to the fringe for sightseeing, I welcome you. But if you plan to destroy the fringe, I won't welcome you. Where's Han Hao? Jar sneered and said, I heard that he is also a God Hunter. Hand him over and tell us where his subordinates are. If you do that, I might just abandon this wretched place of yours and let you perish on your own. If it wasn't for the fact that Jar felt that he couldn't see through Han Shuo, he wouldn't have said those words. He would have killed all of Tanai's men by now. But even though he knew that Han Shuo wouldn't be easy to deal with, he still couldn't change his violent temperament. He behaved as though everyone in the world should listen to his orders. It was as though everyone but those who cultivated in the energy of light and believed in the God of Light were heretics and deserved to die. Han Shuo had no intention of letting Jar off the hook. When he heard that Han Shuo was so arrogant that he demanded him to hand over his little skull, Han Shuo's face sank. He put on a mischievous smile and said, "Jar, who do you think you are? Do you think you're worthy of such a condition?" In Han Shuo's mind, he had already regarded himself as a being on the same level as the god of light who possessed the quintessence. It was only natural that Han Shuo was extremely displeased that Jar, a so-called follower of the god of light, was showing off in front of him. Ha! Jar was instantly enraged. He laughed maniacally and said, "I, Jar, have lived for thousands of years and have never feared anyone but the quintessence over gods. You are the first person in all these years to act so arrogantly in front of me. Good, very good. Even if you hand over Han Hao now, you'll still be dead." Jar wasn't as cunning and scheming as Yaris, who wouldn't immediately attack without a word. The holy light on his body suddenly became blinding as the holy Aurum armor covered his body. Holy energy emanated from his body and the olive branch in his hand, making everyone feel pressured. Jar had a violent and direct personality. He wasn't suited to rule a city, but he was the best fighter. Of the three keepers of the light, Jar was the strongest in combat and had a fearsome reputation throughout Elysium. You won't see anyone acting so arrogantly in front of you anymore. Han Shuo laughed. He wasn't surprised by Jar's display of power. Given Jar's fervent belief in the god of light, it was only normal for him to have the holy Aurum armor. Before Jar could fully unleash the power of the olive branch forged by the god of light, Han Shuo summoned the cauldron of myriad demon and merged it with his 6 avatars in an instant. A new domain of divinity covered the entire fringe. The other Han Shuo in the void spread his arms. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and a bone-chilling gray light descended and bombarded Jar. In an instant, the holy Aurum armor on Jar's body couldn't withstand the attack and cracked. As soon as Jar's olive branch condensed holy light, an enormous gray pillar of light suddenly descended from the sky and smashed into Jar. Rumble! Jar's body exploded. Fragments of the golden armor shot out in all directions. Amidst the holy golden light, Jar's blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Han Shuo waved his hand and tried to use the cauldron of myriad demon to absorb Jar's divine soul. At that moment, a blinding white light in Jar's divine soul suddenly erupted with holy energy and melodious sacred music. The blinding white light morphed into the most common type of light sword and stabbed at Han Shuo. Han Shuo's expression suddenly changed. He sensed the power of the god of light's quintessence from the white light. The white light was probably a mark left by the god of light in Jar's divine soul. Now that it had enveloped Jar's divine soul, it suddenly attacked Han Shuo. In an instant, Han Shuo realized that the god of light must have noticed Jar when he met him in the Omphalos. Therefore, he added an additional wave of attack to Jar's divine soul. The white light morphed into a light sword and stabbed at Han Shuo. Han Shuo had a feeling that it was unavoidable. He had no choice but to form a giant gray net with the energy of his 6 avatars to trap it. Han Shuo focused all his energy on the giant net. Han Shuo was highly focused. His spirit, chi, and spirit were at their peak. Suddenly, the avatar formed from fighting aura moved. At the same time, the avatar formed from the energy of light absorbed a portion of the energy of light that had yet to dissipate after Jar's explosions. To Han Shuo's surprise, the 2 avatars formed from fighting aura and the energy of light had miraculously fused into one. At the same time, the other 5 avatars that cultivated in the energy of life, fire, space-time, destiny, and earth also merged with the one avatar. The 7 elemental energies of light, fighting aura, life, fire, space-time, destiny, and earth formed another huge avatar of God in an instant. Then, it once again released a giant net to trap the light sword. What a genius! You can actually use the energy of my quintessence to make another breakthrough. Very good. It seems that the opening of Sky Castle is not far away. Suddenly, the voice of the god of light came from the white light. Then, the white light no longer persistently attacked Han Shuo. Instead, it wrapped around Jar's divine soul and disappeared instantly. This series of changes happened in the blink of an eye. It started abruptly and ended in an instant. Han Shuo had a very strange feeling in his heart. He raised his head and looked at the two huge shadows above his head. He sensed the incompatible aura of the two avatars and had a strange expression on his face. He had been trying to fuse the other 7 elemental energies into his original avatar but had never considered the possibility of this happening. Light and darkness opposed each other. Death and life opposed each other. Water and fire were incompatible. Therefore, it was very difficult to fuse the 3 energies of light, life, and fire. On the other hand, there was no barrier between the 3 energies of light, life, and fire. The energy of fighting aura was somewhat similar to the energy of light. Under the stimulation of the god of light's quintessence, none of the 7 elemental energies were fused into his original avatar. Instead, they formed another avatar. On one side was an avatar of death, destruction, darkness, water, lightning, and wind. On the other side was an avatar of light, life, fire, earth, destiny, space-time, and fighting aura. The 2 avatars had completely different auras. They seemed to belong to 2 extremes. Since the god hunters are not here, we shall not disturb you any further. Yaris suddenly spoke up just as Han Shuo was lost in his thoughts. He anxiously signaled to Talbot with his eyes, hinting for him to get out of the way. Chapter 994. They were completely awed by Han Shuo's methods. As one of the 3 keepers of light, Jar had made a name for himself on Elysium for a long time. Countless experts had fallen at his hands. For so many years, Jar had been the #1 warrior in the God of Light's dominion and was feared by all. Yet Han Shuo had effortlessly killed such a formidable character. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. Not even the wisp of God of Light's white light that was imbued in Jar's divine soul could harm Han Shuo. Instead, it expressed its admiration for Han Shuo and quietly left. Yaris was a man of great wisdom and vision. He could sense the existence of the God of Light just from that wisp of weak energy from the God of Light's quintessence. His #1 warrior, Jar, had been killed, but the God of Light did not kill Han Shuo immediately. Instead, he said those words. Yaris immediately realized that Han Shuo was not someone he could deal with. When he thought of Han Shuo's massacre in the Dominion of Death and Darkness, as well as the 2 overgods' playful attitude, Yaris vaguely grasped some things. Talbot finally understood why Yaris was so afraid of Han Shuo. He immediately retreated after hearing Yaris's shout. He no longer dared to harbor any thoughts of revenge against Han Shuo. He had completely forgotten about Han Shuo's arrogance in the city of Wraiths. Yaris and Talbot exchanged glances before they stared at Han Shuo with vigilant gazes. They retreated step by step from the Omphalos, fearing that Han Shuo would suddenly make a move and leave them forever in the Omphalos that had been renamed the Omphalos. The Divine Guard chiefs who came with Jar felt a chill run down their spine when they saw that Jar was killed by Han Shuo in an instant. When the divine seal of God of Light transformed into a strand of white light and vanished, the fear in their hearts grew infinitely greater. Hearing Jar's words of farewell, those people did not hesitate to speak up. If the God Hunter Alliance isn't here, we won't disturb you. We came to the Omphalos for the sake of the God Hunter Alliance. We have no intention of becoming enemies with the Pandemonium. We still have important matters to attend to. There's no need to send us off. After Yaris, everyone used different excuses to leave. Without waiting for Han Shuo's reply, they all looked at Han Shuo as if they were facing a formidable enemy and slowly retreated. The only person standing in front of Han Shuo was the overjoyed McKinley. McKinley's eyes were glistening as he stared at the blood splattering from Jar's body. He muttered, "That? Just like that? You're finally finished." Han Shuo, who was immersed in the joy of his breakthrough, snapped out of it when he heard Yaris's words. However, Han Shuo didn't look at Yaris and the others. Instead, he pretended to be deep in thought and stood there motionlessly. The divine guards from the 12 dominions possessed extraordinary strength. Yaris and a few of them even possessed overgod strength. Therefore, Han Shuo didn't pay much attention to them. After pondering for a moment, Han Shuo decided that there was no need for him to deal with those people. On one hand, he didn't want to anger the 12 overgods behind them so soon. On the other hand, Han Shuo had overheard the conversation between Yaris and Talbot. The war of the gods that would engulf the 12 dominions was about to begin. Han Shuo was still looking forward to the battle between Yaris and Talbot. Naturally, he wouldn't come looking for trouble with him. Han Shuo had no intention of participating in the war of the gods. Therefore, it would be wise for him to remain silent at such a crucial moment. With that thought in mind, Han Shuo ignored Yaris and the others as they quietly left. He pretended to be deep in thought about his breakthrough. When Yaris and the others saw that Han Shuo wasn't even looking at them, they hastened their retreat. When they were out of the valley, they immediately turned around and left as fast as they could. In the blink of an eye, the chiefs of divine guards from the 12 dominions had retreated at a much faster speed than when they arrived. It was as though they were afraid that Han Shuo would react and attack them. "Brian, are we just going to let them leave?" Wasis, who was standing beside Han Shuo, hesitated for a moment before he softly asked. Han Shuo put on a smile and replied, "They all have quintessence overgods backing them. Some of them have overgod imprints in their souls. It wouldn't be wise for us to keep them in the fringe. Let them be. They will fight each other anyway." "You mean they will fight among themselves?" Salas was stunned for a moment before he asked in astonishment, "Of course. Just wait and see. The moment we leave the fringe, they will start a war." Who would have thought that the new war of the gods would start in our direction," explained Han Shuo. "I will remain neutral. I don't want to get involved," said McKinley. It was at this moment that McKinley took a deep breath and bowed at Han Shuo. In a deadpan manner, he said, "Brian, it's all thanks to you that we have a grudge for so many years." Han Shuo gestured at McKinley and smilingly said, "You don't have to say that given our friendship. McKinley, you better hurry back to Ethereal City as soon as possible. Their battle might affect Ethereal City. You need to be prepared." "I understand," nodded McKinley. After pondering for a moment, he looked at Han Shuo with a grave face and asked, "Brian, Jar's divine soul is still intact. Is that white light that envelopes him really the god of light?" "That's right." Han Shuo's expression changed slightly. He said to McKinley, "You don't have to think too much about this. The god of light has protected Jar's divine soul. I have no way to completely destroy him. However, Jar is in a terrible state. Back then, only your divine soul and divine body were separated. Although Jar's divine soul is unharmed, his divine body is completely destroyed. You can say that you have avenged your grudge. I'm already satisfied. However, I'm a little worried about you. The god of light has remembered you. I'm afraid that something bad will happen to you." McKinley frowned and paused for a moment before he lamented, "I really don't know how you cultivate to be able to kill Jar so effortlessly. You don't have to worry about me." Han Shuo smiled and said, "Don't worry, I have the ability to protect myself. You should return to Ethereal City as soon as possible. Ethereal City needs you the most right now." "All right, I'll be on my way. Take care, Brian." McKinley did not waste any more time talking to Han Shuo. He decisively left the city and followed behind Yaris and the others. The might of the battle had awed all the invading divine guards. A crisis had been easily resolved. The fringe shouldn't be facing any more dangers for the time being. We still need to hurry up with the reconstruction of Hexopolis. I'll be returning to Pandemonium first. You guys stay here. If you encounter any problems, just contact me through the magical mirror and I'll be there as soon as possible. With the God Hunter Alliance no longer in danger, Yaris and the others hastily retreated from the fringe. Han Shuo was certain that the fringe would be safe for a long time to come. He then began to arrange some new tasks. "All right, we will gather all the remaining gods in the fringe in Hexopolis. We will govern the place according to your rules. Don't worry, we will take good care of the place. We won't let anything happen to it," said Salas. He was in a good mood and was smiling happily. From now on, there would be fewer conflicts in the fringe. Without Tyre, Asura, and Log, those three despicable fellows, they would be able to properly govern the fringe. Once the War of the Gods kicked off, many from the 12 dominions would flock to the fringe. At that time, the fringe would return to its former glory, perhaps even stronger than before. Alright, I'll leave this place to the two of you for the time being. Let's keep in touch, said Han Shuo smilingly before he left Hexopolis. Alright, I'll leave this place to the two of you for the time being. Let's keep in touch, said Han Shuo smilingly before he left Hexopolis. With his current level of consciousness, he could sense any abnormalities in Hexopolis even though he was in Pandemonium. If there were any enemies around Hexopolis, he wouldn't even need Wazer or Salus to inform him. He would have known about them beforehand. Therefore, Han Shuo was very relieved. Soon enough, Han Shuo returned to Pandemonium. Thanks to the innate powers of the 5 elite zombies, the Pandemonium was gradually restored to its original state. The cracks in the ground had all healed and Tanai was once again shrouded in the mist that lingered around Tanai all year round. After returning to Pandemonium, Han Shuo started to rebuild the Pandemonium. First, he had the 5 elite zombies alter the structure of the mountains around the Pandemonium according to the structure he had in mind. Then he used his immense energy to alter the edicts of heaven and earth. He even collapsed the earth, moved the mountains, and filled in the seas. Han Shuo's mental state had reached the demonic lord realm. Adding the energy he had gained from the fusion of his 13 avatars, Han Shuo was unprecedentedly powerful. He spent all his effort in refining the 9th realm mystical Harvester in the chaotic land of Elysium. The 9th realm mystical Harvester was able to attract Han Shuo from another universe in a small place like Profound Continent, turning Profound Continent into one of the 5 perilous lands. Once it was constructed on Elysium, where the yuan qi of heaven and earth was 100 times denser, it would become a divine formation that would shock the heavens and make the gods weep. It was a monumental project. Han Shuo immersed himself in it. Using the powers of the 5 elite zombies and his new understanding of the realm, he collected all kinds of materials from the Fringe, Ethereal City, and the Destiny Dominion. He didn't hesitate to spend an enormous amount of black crystal coins to fill the Pandemonium. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, time flew by and the Pandemonium gradually transformed. The Pandemonium, which was already enormous in size, was added to the surrounding mountains and lakes. Unbeknownst to them, the Pandemonium had expanded 5-fold. Tanai would often see lightning flashes, thunder rumble, and snowfall. Gradually, a wondrous land of incomparable grandeur on Elysium began to take shape as the War of the Gods began to unfold. Under the management of the House of Han, Salus, and Wazer, Hexopolis had regained its former prosperity. No matter which divine domain they came from, as long as they visited Hexopolis, they wouldn't be charged a single black crystal coin. They were allowed to stay and cultivate in peace. 10 years was too short a time. It was naturally impossible for them to recover their energy in a short period of time. However, with such a good omen, and the battles between the various divine realms, more and more demon gods came to Chaos Demon Haven to seek refuge. The situation on Elysium was still uncertain. The entire continent was shrouded in a tense atmosphere. Under such circumstances, Han Shuo ordered those in the Fringe to ignore what was happening outside and focus on managing the Fringe. With Han Shuo's help, the members of the Han family had made extraordinary progress. Many of them made breakthroughs in a short period of time. Fanny, Emily, and the others who had obtained the Overgod's soul had made even greater progress. With the help of the divine energy potions refined by Han Shuo, Fanny, Emily, and Fanny had both entered the realm of mid-stage high god. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before they broke through to the realm of Overgod. The current strength of the Han family far surpassed that of any major family on Elysium. They could even win against the major cities of the Dominions. 10 years ago, Han Shuo killed Jar in Hexopolis and drew out the divine seal of God of Light. Unbeknownst to the 12 Dominions, news of Han Shuo killing Jar and drawing out the divine seal of the God of Light had spread to all 12 Dominions. All the gods on Elysium knew that there was an existence in the Fringe whose strength rivaled that of an overgod. Little Skull Han Hao became the new leader of the God Hunter Alliance. For the past 10 years, Little Skull seemed to have vanished into thin air. Not many knew where he was or where he was. However, the god hunters that had spread across the continent didn't stop because of the war on Elysium. They continued to appear and commit crimes from time to time. Other than the 3 overgods who had met Little Skull Han Hao, very few knew that Little Skull had also obtained the quintessence and became the 13th overgod on Elysium. The situation on Elysium was still changing. An even greater storm was brewing. On this day, a person quietly stepped into the dominion of death. As soon as he stepped into the dominion, he immediately sensed a strange energy fluctuation. He did not immediately move. Instead, he stood still on the spot, waiting for something. After a while, the pure element of death spread out from the void above his head. The purest element of death gradually condensed into an illusory image of the overgod of death, Nestet. Nestet lowered his head to look at the young man who had just stepped into his dominion. Expressionlessly, he said, "Brian, you've come?" That's right, this person was Han Shuo. However, it wasn't Han Shuo, but another Han Shuo formed by his 13 avatars. This Han Shuo had a thin line in the middle of his forehead that looked like a long scar. It was as if he had been divided into 2 halves by the scar. With the thin line as the dividing point, the left side had skin as fair as jade and a holy and benevolent aura. The right side had skin that was slightly darker and had a sinister and vicious aura. For the past 10 years, Han Shuo had been trying to fuse his avatars of 6 and 7 energies, but to no avail. He couldn't find a way to fuse them. After 10 years of hard work, he could barely make the 2 avatars not repel each other so intensely and use the power of space as a dividing line to fuse them into one. Even though the body was barely fused, the 13 energies still repelled each other. Sometimes, a moment of carelessness would cause the 2 avatars to resist each other. The 2 bodies would clash and fight each other. That was Han Shuo's goal. The reason he had forcefully fused his 2 avatars into one and used the power of space as a dividing line was to make them repel each other. He hoped that he could find an opportunity to truly fuse the 13 energies together. "Nestet, why did you send me a message asking me to come to the Death Dominion?" asked Han Shuo coldly as he looked up at the sky. A year ago, someone from the Death Dominion came to the Pandemonium with a divine seal of Nestet. When Han Shuo received the divine seal, he found out that it was an invitation from Nestet to come to the Death Dominion. He said that he had something to discuss with Han Shuo. Han Shuo's main body was stationed at the center of the 9th realm mystical Yin harvester, constantly gathering the mystical Yin energy of heaven and earth. Naturally, he couldn't come to the Pandemonium personally. Therefore, he sent an avatar that was formed from the 13 energies. "This isn't your body, is it?" asked the illusory figure of Nestet after observing for a moment. Han Shuo furrowed his brows and suddenly burst into laughter. He said, "Nestet, you aren't trying to lure my main body here to harm me, are you?" In Han Shuo's mind, he had already considered himself to be on the same level as Nestet. He called him by his real name without any trace of politeness. Back in the Pandemonium, Nestet had tried to harm Little Skull Han Hao. If it wasn't for the sudden increase in his strength and the fact that Little Skull had formed the quintessence, perhaps Nestet would have killed Little Skull. Therefore, Han Shuo didn't have a good impression of Nestet. Naturally, he wouldn't be respectful to him. "If I wanted to deal with you, I wouldn't have waited until now," said Han Shuo coldly. "Back then, when you imprisoned Hill's divine soul, I already knew that you were in the Death Dominion. If I wanted to kill you, you would have died more than 10 years ago. There's no way you could have achieved what you have today." After hearing Nestet's words, Han Shuo was finally certain that the overgods of death and darkness knew about his actions in the Death and Darkness Dominion. The reason why they didn't deal with him back then must be, as the goddess of destiny had said. They needed his power to activate Eternia. "Oh, in that case, what business do you have with me?" asked Han Shuo with a relaxed smile. "You have killed Jar. Given the God of Light's personality, he won't extend an olive branch to you anymore. None of the dominions can avoid the war of the gods this time. The dominions of space and destiny will also participate in the war. Although the fringe is a little small, it is still a major dominions. What are your plans?" asked Nestet as he looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo was stunned. He asked curiously, "You want me to walk with you? You cultivated in the energy of death and destruction. That's your original personality. Since it's impossible for you to reconcile with the God of Light, why don't you walk with us?" Nestet nodded and said, "Don't be in a hurry to agree. You can make a trip to the Darkness Dominion. After a while, the three of us will meet you personally and discuss some other matters with you. Don't worry, it will be good for you." After a moment of silence, Han Shuo said, "All right, we'll talk when the other two arrive." The other two that Nestet referred to were the overgods of destruction and darkness. Chapter 996. The overgod of death, Nestet, did not have a deep conversation with Han Shuo. He vanished as soon as he finished speaking. After Nestet disappeared, Han Shuo suddenly had a strange feeling. Back when he was with the overgod of death, he was still trembling in fear that Nestet would come to him for Hill and Shao. Back then, although Han Shuo had vaguely guessed some things, he wasn't certain. He had been worried that Nestet would show up in the Death Dominion. But now, after more than a decade, Han Shuo was back in the Death Dominion, invited by Nestet. Not only did he not have to worry that Nestet would come after him, he could even talk to Nestet as an equal. The difference in treatment was like the difference between heaven and earth. Now that Han Shuo thought about it, the reason he could talk to Nestet as an equal and the reason Nestet came to meet him was because Han Shuo's strength had reached a whole new realm, a realm that Nestet could acknowledge. Back then, Nestet did not touch Han Shuo because Han Shuo still had some value. But at that time, Nestet did not show up to meet Han Shuo. It was obvious that Nestet didn't think much of Han Shuo. Han Shuo could only change his position and destiny when he possessed sufficient strength. Only then would he not have to worry so much. Han Shuo put on a carefree smile and shook his head. He stopped thinking about the problem and headed to the Darkness Dominion unhurriedly. Han Shuo had many old acquaintances in the Darkness Dominion. He wondered how Erebus, Andre, Elbashi, and Carmelita were doing. Other than that, there was also Donna from Hushvale City. Han Shuo would always feel a sense of guilt whenever he thought of her. Coincidentally, the meeting place with the death, destruction, and darkness overgods was the Darkness Dominion. Han Shuo planned to visit Erebus and the others before heading to Hushvale City to have a good talk with Donna. After making up his mind, Han Shuo increased his speed slightly. While rushing toward the Darkness Dominion, he continued to fuse the power of his two avatars. The City of Shadows, the Saint Residence. Andre, Carmelita, Erebus, Elbashi, and the others gathered together to discuss the War of the Gods in low voices. After Wallace was killed in the City of Gorging Clouds, Andre naturally became the new city lord of the City of Shadows. Although Andre's strength wasn't as great as Wallace's, he was very talented in management. All these years, the City of Shadows had been developing very well under Andre's leadership. Andre was an amiable man and had a very good relationship with the major family clans. He was not like Wallace, who was jealous of talents and would not forcibly expel people just because their family clans were too powerful. Perhaps it was because of Andre's strong points that the City of Shadows could develop so quickly, unlike when Wallace was in charge of the City of Shadows, where wars would break out from time to time. However, Andre's weakness in strength was also very obvious. The patriarchs of the major family clans in the City of Shadows were not particularly respectful to Andre because Andre's strength was not enough to suppress them. If it wasn't for the fact that Andre was appointed to the position of City Lord by the Darkness Overgod, the patriarchs of the major family clans might have long joined forces to impeach him and force him out of the position. Yaris has sent someone to urge us to assemble all our divine guards and be ready to face the attacks from the three dominions at any time. According to Yaris, the dominions of light, life, and water seem to be up to something big. Perhaps the next time they attack, it won't just be a simple probe. Andre was rather worried. After hesitating for a moment, he put on a bitter smile and said, "But the House of Kinson, House of Kisa, and House of Buller have their own plans. They do not wish to mobilize their forces so early and hope that others can take the lead. They are going against my orders in secret. This is really troublesome." Carmelita coldly groaned and said, Those fellas are getting more and more ungrateful. I think it's time for us to make our relationship clear with them. If necessary, we might even have to resort to force." Andrei stared blankly for a moment. After hesitating for a moment, he sighed and said, "Carmelita, I know what you mean. But the three major family clans possess enormous power in the City of Shadows. Putting aside whether it's appropriate for us to go to war at such a crucial time, do you think that our strength is enough to make the three major family clans behave themselves?" Carmelita did not say another word after hearing those words. Her face turned rather ugly. No matter how arrogant Carmelita was, she knew that the current strength of the House of Saint was no longer enough to suppress the three major family clans. This was a time when unity was needed the most. If the House of Saint were to act rashly, they might even infuriate the Overgod of Darkness. If the Overgod of Darkness felt that the House of Saint was acting against his will, the House of Saint would lose all support. Although the patriarchs of the three major family clans sometimes disliked Andrei as the city lord, they at least maintained a respectful facade and did not dare to act against the House of Saint. The reason for this was because Yaris had conveyed the will of the Overgod of Darkness. The three major family clans were not afraid of the House of Saint, but the Overgod of Darkness. "Forget it, just bear with it. After this storm blows over, I will immediately go into seclusion to cultivate. As long as I reach the late-stage realm, the three of them will behave themselves," Andrei said. "For now, the most important thing is to maintain the unity of the Shadow Clan. We must not complicate matters at this time. There's no way we can unite them. If they don't obey orders, we won't be able to gather our forces in the city. When Yaris comes to investigate, the responsibility will still be on our side. Who knows, the Overgod of Darkness might even blame us for our incompetence." Erebus bunched his brows and sighed. "Then what should we do?" Andrei put on a bitter smile. "I heard that Brian is doing very well in the Fringe. Even someone as valiant as Jar was killed by him. If Brian were in the City of Shadows, those fellas wouldn't even dare to fart," Aobashi said softly as she stole a glance at Andrei and Carmelita after hesitating for a moment. Andrei and Carmelita's faces jolted when they heard those words. Carmelita coldly shouted, "Why are you mentioning him? Didn't I say that long ago? Don't ever mention that name again." "Sigh, it's not Brian's fault." Erebus had always been close to Aobashi and he muttered to himself. "No matter what, when he first came to the City of Shadows, our House of Saint has always treated him well. My father also took good care of him back then. But in the end, he didn't even spare my father. I don't want to hear about such a vicious character ever again." Carmelita said fiercely. "That's right. No matter what, Big Brother died in his hands. No matter how close we were to him in the past, we must never associate with him again," Andrei said with a gloomy face. He seemed displeased. "Then why didn't the City of Shadows participate in Yaris's proposal to head to the Fringe to kill Brian?" Aobashi raised her head and glanced at Carmelita and Andrei. Andrei and Carmelita both remained silent. Their faces were terrifyingly gloomy. Aobashi sighed in her heart and did not say anything else. She knew that Andrei and Carmelita had special feelings for Han Shuo and that it wasn't something that could be resolved with mere words. Before Han Shuo killed Wallace, he was very close to Andrei and Carmelita. When Wallace wanted to deal with Han Shuo, Andrei and Han Shuo had even disregarded their familial ties and tried to stop Wallace. They had helped the Han family a lot and truly considered Han Shuo as their last friend. But in the end, Wallace had indeed died in the hands of Han Shuo. This was an irreconcilable conflict. It was so complicated that Aobashi didn't know how to help them resolve it. All these years, Aobashi and Erebus had tried to persuade the two, but the two were convinced that Han Shuo shouldn't have killed Wallace. Therefore, they had never forgiven Han Shuo no matter what they said. Sigh. It was at this moment that a long sigh sounded from outside. It sounded like the owner of the sigh was extremely helpless and melancholic. "Who's there?" A guard from the Saint residence suddenly shouted in an attempt to locate the source of the sigh. They were in the Saint residence. Andrei and Carmelita were having a meeting in a secret chamber. No one was allowed to approach them. It was at this moment that a strange sigh sounded. The divine guards immediately got into action and started searching for the intruder as though they were facing a great enemy. Andre, Carmelita, Erebus, and Aobashi were stunned for a moment. They seemed to have recalled something from that familiar voice. After a long while, Erebus was startled and stood up from his seat. He cried out in alarm, "Damn it! Am I hallucinating? I think I heard Brian's voice just now." "I don't think so. He should be in the fringe right now. There's no way he would be here." "Ha, Erebus, we must have been too nervous lately." Aobashi shook her head and laughed. Suddenly, her expression froze and she said in a daze, "That can't be right. You and I both heard it. It can't be a hallucination. But it's also impossible for Brian to be here. Perhaps it was someone with a voice similar to Brian's." Maybe I should go out and take a look," Aobashi mumbled to herself. She got up and prepared to go out and take a look. "It's him. It's definitely him," said Carmelita stubbornly as she bit her lips so hard that they were about to bleed. Andre abruptly stood up. A trace of pleasant surprise flashed across his eyes. But shortly after, as though he suddenly recalled something, he took a glance at Carmelita beside him and sat back down. After taking a short pause, he said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about it. Let him be." "How can we do that?" Aobashi bunched her brows and said, "The intruder might have heard our conversation. If it's not Brian, we must find out who he is. If it really is Brian, even if you don't want to see him, Erebus and I are friends with him. This is the City of Shadows. We must see him no matter what." After saying those words, Aobashi hastily signaled Erebus with her eyes. Erebus nodded knowingly and said, "That's right, that's right." While the two of them were talking, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, their eyes darted back and forth between Carmelita and Andre, observing their expressions. Chapter 997. Carmelita and Andre remained silent as though they did not hear Erebus and Aobashi's conversation. They neither expressed their admiration nor objected. Aobashi and Erebus exchanged glances. After a short pause, Aobashi let out a soft cough and said, "I'm going to take a look." With that said, Aobashi immediately walked out of the place without waiting for Andre and Carmelita's consent. Actually, you can't blame Brian for what happened back then. The City Lord did push him too far. Back in the City of Gorging Clouds, the City Lord also wanted to deal with Brian. Under those circumstances, Brian didn't seem to be able to do anything, so. In the end, Erebus did not manage to finish his words, because Carmelita's cold gaze had already landed on him. Erebus suddenly came to a realization. No matter what, Wallace was already dead, and this matter could no longer be explained clearly. She and Andre seemed to be the ultimate victims. Andre shook his head and sighed. The corners of his mouth curled up into a bitter smile. He muttered, "How dare he come? Even if we don't deal with him, Yaris won't let go of such a good opportunity. Besides, this is the Darkness Dominion. Big Brother's divine soul still has the Overgod's mark. I wonder if the Overgod will sense it and blame us." After taking the position of City Lord, Andre's thoughts were much more complicated than Carmelita's. It wasn't just the enmity between the House of Saint and Han Shuo. Looking at the bigger picture, Elysium wasn't at peace at the moment. It was extremely inappropriate for Han Shuo to come to the Darkness Dominion alone. Carmelita's expression changed. She hesitated for a moment before she said to Erebus, "You should go take a look. If it's really him, drive him away." "I don't have the power to drive him away," Erebus shook his head with a bitter smile. Carmelita was obviously anxious. She said, "We don't want to see him. He won't get any benefits in the Darkness Dominion. Drive him away." It was only then that Erebus realized something. He sized up Carmelita suspiciously and then looked at Andre. When he saw Andre secretly nod at him, Erebus' eyes lit up as though he understood something. He nodded and said, "If I really see him, I will drive him away." After saying that, Erebus gave Carmelita and Andre a strange look before leaving without a word. After Erebus left, Carmelita sighed and grumbled, "Why did he come back? Isn't he doing fine in the fringe?" After a moment of hesitation, Andre said softly, "He should be fine. He was able to walk out of the darkness dominion unscathed the last time, so he should be fine this time as well. The streets of the City of Shadows were lined with shops. After exiting the Saint residence, Aobashi strolled alone in the surrounding shops without saying a word. Those divine guards in the City of Shadows who recognized Aobashi hastily went to report to her as soon as they saw her. They thought that something bad had happened in the city. Aobashi gestured for them to stay away from her. But after a few steps, she noticed that Erebus had also come out from the Saint residence and was happily following her. "What's going on?" Aobashi shot a glance at Erebus and asked indifferently. "It's nothing. I can see that Carmelita and Andre still treat him as a friend. It's just that due to Wallace's death, it's impossible for them to be as close as before." Erebus smiled as he recounted Carmelita and Andre's reactions. Aobashi nodded and said nothing more after hearing his words. The two of them tacitly headed towards a secluded area. It was none other than the ruins of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the City of Shadows. For some unknown reason, even after the Han family had left the City of Shadows, this piece of land, which was worth an inch of gold, had been preserved. No shop had been able to purchase it from the House of Saint. Perhaps because it had been a long time since anyone had cleaned the place, it was a little dirty and dusty. But Aobashi and Erebus paid no attention to it and walked straight into it. Everyone in the Darkness Dominion knew of Han Shua's deeds. Even though the Han family had long left the City of Shadows, no one dared to destroy this place. Many experts in the City of Shadows held this place in awe. Even the patriarchs of the three major family clans had secretly instructed their disciples not to destroy any of the Han family's buildings in the City of Shadows. The patriarchs of the three major family clans did not even treat the Saint family with such solemnity. This was a clear indication of how important Han Shua was to them. After Aobashi and Erebus entered the place, they suddenly discovered a person standing under a tall and dirty building. He was looking at them with a smile. "Brian, it's been a while," Aobashi said in a subtle smile. "Ha, it's really you. I knew my ears weren't that bad." Erebus laughed heartily. He suddenly took a few steps forward and hugged Han Shua. He only let go of Han Shua after punching him 3 times with his iron fist. Soon after, he put on a solemn face and sized up Han Shua. He asked, "What's wrong? Were you injured? Why is there such a long scar on your face? You can heal all of Carmelita's injuries, but can't you erase the scar on your face?" The thin line that split Han Shua in half was too conspicuous. Fortunately, Han Shua was wearing clothes. Otherwise, Erebus and Aobashi would have noticed that the thin line glowed brightly and gave off intense fluctuations of spacetime. "It's just a small wound. I'm fine." Han Shua smiled and did not elaborate on the matter. He looked at Erebus and Aobashi and softly sighed. He asked, "Do they still hate me?" Erebus and Aobashi were rather embarrassed. They did not know how to answer. "I knew it would turn out this way. It's only natural that they don't forgive me. Many of my Han family's guards were killed because of Wallace. Wallace also wanted to kill me. If I didn't kill him, the Han family would never have a day of peace. I had no other choice." Han Shua sighed and forced a smile. "I came over this time just to see you guys. Since they don't want to see me, then forget it. Actually, it's not what you think. Andre and Carmelita are still your friends. They are very concerned about you. It's just that the entire city knows that you killed Wallace. If Andre and Carmelita are still in contact with you at this time, the entire House of Saint will find them for revenge," Erebus explained. "Even just now, they were still very worried that you would be in danger in the Darkness Dominion. They were afraid that Yaris and the others would come after you." Erebus paused and looked up at the sky, as though he was worried about something. Aobashi's expression slightly changed. She reprimanded, "Don't talk nonsense." She knew that the Darkness Overgod possessed remarkable abilities and that some of her words could send Erebus into a state of eternal damnation. "It's fine. Elysium may be vast, but there aren't many who would dare to touch me. Not to mention in the dominions of darkness, death, and destruction." Han Shua chuckled. With his current strength, there was really nothing to fear. Oh, you sure are confident. Aobashi giggled and said, you have grown up over the years. I heard that the entire fringe is yours. You even killed Jar, one of the 3 guardians of the light in the dominion of God of Light, right? I've been living in the city of shadows for so long. How about I join you in the fringe? As long as you come to the fringe, I will raise both hands in approval. Han Shuo, of course, knew that Aobashi was joking. She had lived in the city of shadows for a long time and was indebted to Wallace. Even though Wallace was no longer around, she was still busy working for the House of Saint. She had always wanted to repay Wallace's kindness. Cowardly? Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. He bunched his brows and said, given your strength in the city of shadows, Erebus, and the House of Saint, who would dare to go against you? The situation has changed. Erebus forced a smile and explained the current situation in the City of Shadows to Han Shuo. After Erebus finished, Han Shuo nodded and said, so that's how it is. Without saying much, Han Shuo took out a few items and handed them to Erebus and Aobashi. He smilingly said, take these. These are for the 2 of you. The rest are for Carmelita and Andre. They are, back in the fringe, Han Shuo had killed quite a number of high gods. Among them, quite a few were experts in late-stage high god realm. Han Shuo had refined their divine souls into orbs of arcana that allowed him to fuse the essence of the energy contained within with his own soul. Other than those 2 items, Han Shuo also gave Erebus and Aobashi some divine energy medicines that could help them achieve breakthroughs. These are too precious. Where did you get them? Erebus' expression changed abruptly after hearing Han Shuo's explanation. Nothing precious. I have plenty of them. Ignoring Aobashi and Erebus' astonishment, Han Shuo said, as for Carmelita and Andre, don't tell them that I gave them to them. I'm afraid that they won't accept them. The reason why Andre can't suppress those people is because he doesn't have enough strength. This is very important to him. Without giving Aobashi and Erebus a chance to refuse, Han Shuo laughed heartily and said, it's not easy for us to meet again. Come, let's drink till we're drunk. As soon as he finished those words, fine wine and delicacies appeared in a miniature space in midair as though by magic. Han Shuo greeted the 2, handed them wine, and drank to their heart's content. While Andre was in the middle of dealing with the affairs of the City of Shadows, a divine guard suddenly appeared and knelt in front of Andre. He reported, City Lord, the patriarchs of the Kinsen, Kisa, and Buller family clans have sent representatives to us at the same time. They say that they are willing to accept our terms and conditions. They will integrate the forces of their family clans into the Divine Guards and be under our command. What? Andre was greatly astonished. I have been trying for so long, but the 3 family clans have been indifferent to me. Why did they suddenly agree to our conditions? I don't know. The Divine Guard shook his head. Andre was stunned. After a long while, he suddenly recalled something and softly mumbled, could it be? Chapter 998. The attitude of the 3 family clans changed drastically. They obediently accepted Andre's orders and did not dare to haggle over the details. The problem that had been troubling Andre for a long time was solved overnight. The change was too sudden. Others might not know how selfish and treacherous the patriarchs of the 3 family clans were, but how could Andre, who had known them for so many years, not know? You're dismissed. Andre waved his hand. When he was alone in the secret chamber, he muttered, Brian, oh Brian, you sure are a big deterrent. Even after so many years, the patriarchs of the 3 family clans still listen to you. The problem that had been troubling Andre was, of course, solved by Han Shuo. Han Shuo asked Erebus to meet with the 3 patriarchs and vaguely expressed his attitude towards them under the guise of reminiscing about old times. The patriarchs of the 3 family clans immediately turned pale with fright. They immediately sent messengers to the Saint residence and obediently accepted the Saint residence's orders. Putting aside how powerful Han Shuo had become, the news of Han Shuo returning to the Darkness Dominion alone, wreaking havoc in the City of Gorging Clouds, and killing Wallace and Hoffs in a fit of rage had long spread throughout the Darkness Dominion. In the eyes of the gods of the Darkness Dominion, Han Shua, who had killed Wallace and Hoffs and then left the Darkness Dominion in such a calm manner, was shrouded in an incomparably powerful and mysterious aura. Not many would dare to disrespect such a character. Obashi, Erebus, I've been in the City of Shadows for a few days now. I've had a great time drinking. But I still have some matters to attend to and will be leaving for Hushvale City today, said Han Shua smilingly as he bade farewell to the two in the lush forest outside the city. Han Shua had spent the past few days chatting and laughing with the two at the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy ruins. Some powerful characters in the city had vaguely heard of Han Shua's whereabouts, but no one dared to cause him trouble. Han Shua had purposely asked Aobashi and Erebus to spread some news. However, Andre and Carmelita did not show up. Han Shua was more or less a bit disappointed, so he decided to leave as soon as possible. Don't think too much about it. Andre is busy dealing with important matters in the city. He shouldn't have the time. Carmelita is still cultivating in the gymnasium. Perhaps she doesn't even know that you are in the City of Shadows, Erebus explained. Han Shua, of course, knew that Erebus wasn't telling the truth. He simply smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Take care of yourselves. Come to the fringe whenever you're free." You're always welcome. As soon as he finished speaking, Han Shua took a step forward, and he was already 50 kilometers away. In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared without a trace. After a while, rustling sounds could be heard from the dense thicket. Carmelita walked to Erebus and Aobashi's side. She looked at the direction in which Han Shua disappeared and said, "I don't think he will return to the City of Shadows anymore. No, he will come over when he has time." Aobashi stepped forward and pulled Carmelita's little hand. The corners of her mouth curved into a faint smile as she said, "Given his strength, he must know that you are nearby. Although you didn't show yourself, he should know that you came to see him off." "I didn't come to see him off. I was just passing by." Carmelita curled her lips and softly groaned. "So be it. Come, let's return." I have a lot of good stuff with me. Bring them to the city lord later. They will be very useful for increasing your strength." Aobashi pulled Carmelita's little hand and slowly returned to the City of Shadows. Just as Carmelita said, with Han Shua's consciousness, he had long discovered Carmelita's presence. But since Carmelita did not take the initiative to meet him, he could only feign ignorance. Han Shua still felt somewhat guilty towards Carmelita. No matter what, he had killed her father. Although Wallace was cruel to him, he loved his daughter dearly. The grudge in Carmelita's heart wouldn't be easily erased. However, Han Shua was very gratified that Carmelita was willing to come. He felt that his trip to the City of Shadows was not in vain. Even if he couldn't be as close as he used to be with Andre and Carmelita, at least he wouldn't have to hate them. Han Shua felt much more relaxed after having a weight lifted from his heart. He stealthily made his way to Hushvale City. Donna's graceful figure gradually entered Han Shua's mind. The corners of Han Shua's mouth curled into a strange smile. He galloped to his heart's content. In just one night, Han Shua had stealthily arrived at Hushvale City. The so-called tight defenses of the city were practically non-existent to him. The House of Lavers took over Hushvale City at the behest of the Overgod of Darkness. Not only did Felder's House of Lavers survive, but he also obtained one of the 7 cities of the Dominion of Darkness. The grievances he suffered in the City of Gorging Clouds were long gone. Now, he was in high spirits as he managed Hushvale City. Unlike Andre, Field had made a breakthrough in his state of mind within a short period of time. Not long after he returned to Hushvale City and took over the position of City Lord, he broke through to late-stage High God realm in one fell swoop. Field, who now possessed valiant strength and the Overgod's imprint in his divine soul, had advanced by leaps and bounds. He even surpassed the patriarchs of the major family clans in the city. With the support of Field's formidable strength, the House of Lavers developed rapidly. On top of that, Field was a tactful person and had a good relationship with the major family clans. Hushvale City was unprecedentedly united. The House of Lavers had completely replaced the House of Hoffley and became the new overlords of Hushvale City. Currently, The Lavers' residence was located in the center of the most flourishing street in Hushvale City. It was even better than when the Lavers' residence was in the City of Shadows. The moonlight was cold and the breeze was gentle. Han Shuo strolled in the Lavers' residence. None of the energy towers around him seemed to have detected his presence. They did not emit even the slightest vigilance. With a faint smile on his face, Han Shuo unhurriedly walked to a room based on the probing of his consciousness. After he arrived, he started drinking and waiting. Not long after, Donna, who had been summoned by Field to discuss important matters in the city, slowly walked towards Han Shuo. Field attached great importance to Donna's opinion. For the past few years, Wallace had been obedient to Donna's every word. Usually, he would consult Donna for her opinion on important matters in the city. Many years ago, due to Field's refusal to heed Donna's suggestion, the House of Lavers and Han Shuo became estranged. The House of Lavers was forced to leave their homeland and was nearly consigned to eternal damnation. Having learned his lesson, Field had a lingering fear in his heart. He truly acknowledged Donna's foresight. Donna, who was about to open the door, suddenly heard a gurgling sound coming from inside her room. Her pretty face jolted. Donna calmly prepared herself. She took a deep breath, abruptly pushed the door open, and coldly shouted, "Who's there?" Donna suddenly saw the person drinking leisurely. She covered her mouth and let out a soft cry. Donna glared at Han Shuo with her bright eyes and gritted her teeth. After draining the bottle of wine in one gulp, Han Shuo sized up Donna with a sinister smile and said, "What? Am I not welcome here?" Donna stomped her foot and abruptly turned around to close the door. After applying several boundaries outside the door, she flew and stood in front of Han Shuo. She stopped one step in front of Han Shuo and asked in a low voice, "Why are you here?" Grabbing Donna's soft and fair hand, Han Shuo smilingly said, "Can I come?" Joy overflowed from Donna's face to Donna's entire body. Her petite body was trembling and her face was flushed. She touched Han Shuo's cheek and murmured, "I thought you would never come to find me. Originally, I was planning to wait for things to settle down here before going to look for you. I didn't expect you to actually come. You actually came? I'm here." Han Shuo helped Donna to sit down and softly asked, "How are you doing in Hushvale City?" "Very well. My father has broken through to late-stage High God realm. In addition, my father has obtained the Overgod's approval. No family clans dare to cause trouble in the dark. Although Hushvale City can't be compared to other cities, I'm sure it will continue to develop at this rate." Donna smiled and allowed Han Shuo to hold her little hand. She happily told him about Hushvale City. Han Shuo smilingly listened to Donna's narration. From time to time, he would chime in with a few words. As he listened to Donna, he gained a deeper understanding of the situation in Hushvale City. Suddenly, Donna stopped talking. She looked at Han Shuo's little hand that was holding hers as though she was complaining about something. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. When he saw that Donna was looking at him with a resentful face, he put on a bitter smile and asked, "What's wrong? According to you, there shouldn't be anyone in Hushvale City who dares to bully you. You have so many beauties around you in the fringe, yet you left me here alone. You heartless bastard." Donna bunched her brows and glanced at Han Shuo's little hand that was holding hers. The resentment in her eyes intensified. "You know that I'm a busy man. I've been involved in almost every major battle in the fringe all these years. I don't have the time to have so many beauties around me." Han Shuo put on a bitter smile and complained, "The path of cultivation is like rowing a boat against the current. If I don't advance, I'll be going backwards. I'm either scheming with the sovereigns all day long or spending all my free time on making breakthroughs in my state of mind. I'm even busier than you. I don't care. You've been having so many beauties around you and never came to see me." Donna suddenly threw a tantrum. She pulled her hand away from Han Shuo's grasp and put on an indignant face. It was obvious that Donna was angry. However, her anger came out of nowhere. Everything was fine just a moment ago, but it suddenly turned out like this. Even a so-called expert like Han Shuo, who had a good understanding of women, couldn't grasp Donna's thoughts for a moment. He secretly looked at Donna with a pleasant expression. Donna put some distance between herself and Han Shuo as though she was still mad at him. She didn't even look at him. Han Shuo, who didn't know what Donna was thinking, took a step forward with a bitter smile and grabbed Donna. Before she could struggle, he hugged her tightly. In a situation where you don't know what a woman is thinking, hugging is the best solution. This was Han Shuo's many years of experience. As expected, Donna pretended to struggle for a moment and then stopped moving. She buried her head on Han Shuo's shoulder and said resentfully, "Why are you so well-behaved this time? Why are your hands and feet so obedient?" Han Shuo was stunned for a moment before he realized what was going on. He smiled bitterly in his heart. So Donna is blaming me for not making a move on her. She's too honest. Chapter 999. Han Shuo's avatar was an avatar that was forcibly fused with 13 profound energies. He wasn't adept at controlling it. When he saw that Donna was so well-behaved because she was afraid that the overly chaotic energies in his body would accidentally injure her, Han Shuo had no choice but to try his best to explain the reason to her. Donna soon believed him because when Donna leaned on Han Shuo, she felt that the darkness divine energy in her body had become somewhat uncontrollable. At first, Donna thought that it was because she was too excited to see Han Shuo. But after listening to Han Shuo's explanation, she realized that the problem wasn't with her. However, even so, Donna was willing to gently hug Han Shuo. Of course, as she knew that this wasn't Han Shuo's body, Donna did not make out with him. From Donna's point of view, Han Shuo was nothing but a puppet. She more or less felt uncomfortable in her heart. Han Shuo's heart was palpitating with fear. He was afraid that this overly complicated body of energy would accidentally injure Donna. When Donna hugged him, he didn't dare to move a muscle. He appeared somewhat terrified. Donna sensed his nervousness and after chatting with him for a while, she let go of him. Then, she began to talk about the past events of the City of Shadows and Profound Continent. While Han Shuo was earnestly listening to Donna, his eyes suddenly flashed and he softly said, "Your father is here." Donna's charming face blushed. She appeared rather anxious and hastily said to Han Shuo, "Then you should hide quickly." Han Shuo put on a smile but didn't get up. He replied, "Why should I hide? There's no harm in seeing him." Donna's face turned even redder. She stomped her foot in annoyance and said, "Let's see him then. I'm not afraid." Soon, Field came to the door and saw that there was a barrier in front of the house. He was stunned for a moment before he raised his voice and asked, "Why did you set up a barrier? I have something to discuss with you." Donna removed the barrier and opened the door to let Field in. She blushed and said, "Brian is here." Contrary to Donna's expectations, Field wasn't surprised at all. He said, "I knew he was here, but I didn't expect him to find you so soon. I came here to talk to you about him." As he said this, Field came in and stood in front of Han Shuo. This time, even Han Shuo was rather surprised. He sat upright and still, bunched his brows, looked at Field and asked, "You received this information from the City of Shadows?" Shaking his head, Field sat down by himself and said, "The Master God of Darkness sent me a message through his divine souls." Donna was aghast. She looked outside and hastily shut the door. Then she walked to Field and grabbed Field's arm. She asked anxiously, "What do we do?" When Han Shuo went on a killing spree in the Darkness Dominion more than a decade ago, everyone thought that the Darkness Overgod would deal with Han Shuo. Donna was no exception. Donna's heart palpitated when she heard that the Darkness Overgod had directly sent a mental message to her father. She was worried for both Han Shuo and the House of Lavers. Field turned to look at Donna and sighed in his heart. He wondered how much more hardship his daughter would have to endure in the future. Then Field turned his gaze to Han Shuo. He knew that Han Shuo had many beautiful women around him, and none of them were easy to deal with. Donna was a member of the House of Lavers. Back then, the House of Lavers had dealt with the Han family. Although the House of Lavers was the one who suffered the most in the end, there was still a grudge between them. Han Shuo might be magnanimous and forgiving, but there was no guarantee that the women of the Han family wouldn't hate him. "Donna, what are you worried about?" Han Shuo put on a carefree smile and said calmly, Since I dared to come to the Darkness Dominion, I am confident that I can leave with ease. Don't be nervous. That's different. No one can contend against the might of an overgod. The last time you were in the city of gorging clouds, it was at the edge of the Darkness Dominion. That was why you could leave so easily. But this is Hushvale City. My father even received a divine message. What should I do? Donna didn't relax despite Han Shua's reassurance. She still looked nervous and anxious. Donna's strength was too low. It was obvious that she didn't understand how terrifying the power of an overgod with quintessence was. Just like how Han Shua could see through everything in the fringe, if an overgod of darkness wanted to settle scores with someone a level lower than him, that person wouldn't be able to escape. The reason Han Shua was able to leave the city of gorging clouds unscathed wasn't because he managed to evade in time, but because the darkness overgod went easy on him. For someone like Donna, Han Shua's survival was just a fluke. She didn't understand the intricacies behind it. Don't worry. I'll be fine. Han Shua comforted Donna once more. Then he turned to Field and said with a smile, "The darkness overgod didn't send you a spiritual message to deal with me, did he? Tell me, what message did he want you to pass on to me?" Han Shua maintained a leisurely attitude even when he was talking to Field, Donna's father. At his realm of strength, he wouldn't be bound by the rules of the secular world. "You know that the darkness overgod didn't want us to deal with you?" Field was a little surprised. "I came to the Darkness Dominion under their invitation. Of course I know that he didn't send you a spiritual message to deal with me." After taking a short pause, Han Shua put on a smile and said bluntly, "Besides, even if he really wanted to deal with me, he wouldn't have told you about it." Although Field had advanced to late-stage High God realm, he posed no threat to Han Shua. Han Shua could kill him with a wave of his hand if he so desired. Nestet, the overgod of death, had witnessed Han Shua's strength 10 years ago. The darkness overgod, who was on good terms with Han Shua, could roughly guess Han Shua's strength. If Han Shua really wanted to deal with Han Shua, he wouldn't have sent a small character like Field. Field couldn't help but put on a bitter smile after hearing Han Shua's words. He knew that what Han Shua said was true. 10 years ago, Han Shua was able to kill Jar with ease. Given the strength of Hushvale City, even if all of them joined forces, Han Shua wouldn't be a match for Han Shua. Suddenly, Field's heart thumped and he asked, "The three invited you?" "The three overgods of death, darkness, and destruction have invited me to the Darkness Dominion. I wonder what they are up to," replied Han Shua casually. Field and Donna were stunned. They looked at Han Shua in disbelief. The overgods of death, darkness, and destruction were existences far beyond their reach. They had never even seen the overgods that they worshipped in their shrines. Yet, these existences that stood at the pinnacle of Elysium had invited Han Shua to the Darkness Dominion, and all three of them. What did such treatment mean? It meant that they had treated Han Shua as a distinguished guest. That was simply impossible. The majesty of an overgod with a quintessence was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people on Elysium. They would only interact with overgods who also possessed a quintessence. Other than that, they viewed everyone else as their slaves. There could only be one explanation for the three overgods inviting Han Shua to the Darkness Dominion at the same time. They had treated Han Shua as an equal. "Brian, you're not joking, are you?" Donna only recovered from her shock after a long time. However, the shock on her face was still there and her voice was trembling slightly. Han Shua understood what an overgod with a quintessence meant to them. He didn't explain too much and asked Field with a smile, "What message did the overgod of darkness want you to pass on to me?" Field, who had finally recovered from his shock, took a deep breath and went over the message from the overgod of darkness in detail. After making sure that he had not misunderstood, he said to Han Shua, "He wants you to head to the Darkness Shrine in 2 days. I will tell you the location of the Darkness Shrine." After a short pause, Field forced a smile and shook his head. He said to the still skeptical Donna, I'm afraid that Brian is telling the truth. I've thought about it carefully. The message the overgod left me was to treat Brian as a distinguished guest. I didn't understand why the overgods were behaving so strangely, but now I know that Brian was invited by the 3 overgods. Donna was dumbfounded. She looked at Han Shua up and down for a long while before she asked, Are you really that powerful? She knew that Han Shua had made rapid progress. However, back when she first met Han Shua on Profound Continent, Han Shua was just a puny low god who had only been on Elysium for a few hundred years. In just a few hundred years, Han Shua had gained the strength to attract the attention of the quintessence overgods. To Donna, who had been paying close attention to Han Shua's growth and progress, this was too much for her to accept. Haha, I don't know if I'm really that powerful. Han Shua spread out his hands and said smilingly, but I know that even the quintessence overgods wouldn't dare to kill me. Besides, they would have a favor to ask of me. Donna was at a loss for words. She looked at Han Shua absent-mindedly and found it hard to imagine how Han Shua managed to reach this realm. Ahem. Field shot a glance at Donna and said, Little Na, can you leave for a moment? I have something to discuss with Brian in private. You are not allowed to know the location of the Shrine of Darkness. Donna looked at Han Shua in a daze for a moment before she softly said, I'll be leaving then. You two talk. After Donna left, Field suddenly let out a soft sigh and said, If I had listened to Little Na back then, our House of Lavers wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses. Every time Field saw that Han Shua grew stronger, the regret in his heart would deepen. It was because he had underestimated Han Shua that his younger brother Avery died, caused the House of Lavers to be forced to leave their homeland and almost be exterminated in the city of Gorging Clouds. Where is the Shrine of Darkness? Han Shua didn't want to dwell on the past. After telling Han Shua the location of the Shrine of Darkness, Field looked deeply at Han Shua and said, Brian, treat Donna better. After a moment of hesitation, Field said softly, I beg of you. He knew that due to the huge gap in strength, he could never put on airs in front of Han Shua. Han Shua nodded and said seriously, Don't worry, I will treat her well. Chapter 1000. As soon as Field left, Donna immediately asked Han Shua, What did my father talk about with you? He just talked about the Darkness Shrine. There's nothing special about it. Han Shua smiled and said to Donna, Your father's luck is pretty good. The Darkness Overgod specifically sent him a spiritual message. It seems like he thinks highly of him. With this, his position in Hushvale City will be unshakable in the future. In a divine territory governed by a quintessence overgod, as long as the overgod took a liking to you, you would definitely rise to prominence one day. Field's strength was clear for all to see, and he was quick-witted. With Hushvale City in his hands, the Darkness Overgod would definitely promote him. Nothing else? Donna was a little bashful. She blushed and whispered, He didn't mention anything about the matter between us? Donna was still a little worried. She was afraid that Field would have a different opinion on the matter between her and Han Shua. It was impossible for Donna to ignore Field's opinion. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua reminded Donna, Your father didn't say anything. He only told me to treat you well. To prevent Donna from thinking too much, Han Shua reminded her. Donna understood. After hearing Han Shua's words, she immediately knew that Field had no objections. Her face turned even redder. She stared at Han Shua and whispered, Then, will you listen to my father? What do you think? Han Shua held Donna's little hand and smiled wickedly as he stared at Donna. Donna and Han Shua stared at each other for a few seconds. Then she retreated in panic. She lowered her head in embarrassment and angrily stomped on Han Shua's foot to vent the dissatisfaction in her heart. I will be leaving for a while to meet the 3 of them. I will come to Hushvale City to look for you after I'm done with my discussion. Han Shua looked sincerely at Donna and said, If there's nothing urgent to attend to in Hushvale City, make some preparations. When I come looking for you, come with me to the fringe. Donna was obviously pleasantly surprised. But after hesitating for a moment, she sighed softly and said, I'll discuss this with Father. There are a lot of things that need to be done in Hushvale City, and our family is short on manpower. Let's see what Father thinks. Don't worry. Your father is protected by someone above him. He will be safe and sound in Hushvale City. Besides, it's not like you can stay in Hushvale City forever to help him. I have a lot of work to do in the fringe, said Han Shuo as he held Donna's hand and smiled ambiguously. The fringe was indeed very busy. However, with Phoebe, Emily, and so many other members of the Han family running things, the fringe wasn't really short on manpower. It was just an excuse for Han Shuo. I'll talk to father, said Donna happily. It seems that she will have a good talk with Field. I believe your father will be willing to let you go, said Han Shuo as he reached out to tidy up Donna's hair. All right, there's no time to lose. I'll be leaving now. I'll look for you as soon as I'm done with my discussion. Donna was rather reluctant to part with Han Shuo. She had intended to be a little more friendly to him before he left. However, when she recalled that Han Shuo's body was rather strange, she gave up on the idea. She gently reminded Han Shuo to be careful before she let Han Shuo leave. After leaving Hushvale City, Han Shuo headed straight for Mirage City. According to Field, the Shrine of Darkness was located in the Black Domain Forest located at the center of the Darkness Dominion. The Black Domain Forest was the border region between Mirage City, Hushvale City, and the City of Shadows. The Black Domain Forest was filled with towering ancient trees. The sunlight and moonlight would be blocked by the enormous tree leaves. Even under the scorching sun, one would feel very gloomy. Back when he was in the City of Shadows, Han Shuo had guessed that the Shrine of Darkness was located in the Black Domain Forest. As the Black Domain Forest was a restricted area for several cities, it was usually sparsely populated. The major cities strictly forbade outsiders from entering the Black Domain Forest. Gods who disobeyed the advice of the Shrine of Darkness never returned alive. Back when Han Shuo guessed that the Shrine of Darkness was located in the Black Domain Forest, he did not have the courage to explore it. Back then, overgods with quintessence were legendary existences in Han Shuo's eyes. Back then, his strength was too weak and he did not have the confidence to take the risk. Although the journey from Hushvale City to the Black Domain Forest wasn't a short one, Han Shuo's current speed was really fast. In just half a day, he arrived at the entrance of the Black Domain Forest. Sensing the element of darkness in the Black Domain Forest that was much denser than other places, Han Shuo took a deep breath and stepped into the Black Domain Forest. Although Han Shuo confidently said that he would be fine in front of Field and Donna, Han Shuo was still rather worried when he actually stepped into the Black Domain Forest. If the overgods of death, destruction, and darkness were to attack him together in the Black Domain Forest, Han Shuo wasn't confident that he would be able to escape easily in such a special place. After stepping into the Black Domain Forest, Han Shuo unfolded his consciousness and slowly sensed the unusual flow of the element of darkness. After sensing for a moment, Han Shuo headed towards the region where the element of darkness was the densest. The overgods of darkness, death, and destruction are looking for me? What are they up to? Along the way, Han Shuo had been pondering this question, but he couldn't come up with an answer. According to the overgod of death, Nestet, the reason the three invited Han Shuo to the Black Domain Forest wasn't just to unite the fringe. Originally, Han Shuo had no intention of participating in the War of the Gods. But judging from Nestet's tone, it sounded as though no continent could escape the war. Even the dominions of space and fate, which had always advocated staying out of worldly affairs, would inevitably be affected. It was likely that the war wouldn't be as simple as most people thought it to be. After learning some secrets from the divine soul of Cause, hegemon of the Life Dominion, and learning about the special influence the existence of godhunters had on the 12 quintessence overgods, Han Shuo grew extremely wary of the 12 quintessence overgods. He couldn't understand why they would watch him grow stronger and use his power to open Eternia. It was precisely because of these doubts that Han Shuo took the risk to come to the Black Domain Forest. Rustle, rustle. Han Shuo stepped on the soft leaves and strolled forward. He didn't break through the air. Sensing the distribution of the element of darkness in his consciousness, Han Shuo identified his direction and slowly made his way to the center of the Black Domain Forest. Along the way, Han Shuo didn't discover any living beings in the Black Domain Forest. The deathly stillness of the forest made it seem rather unusual. As Han Shuo ventured deeper into the Black Domain forest, Han Shuo discovered that the other elements in the world were getting scarcer and scarcer while the element of darkness was getting denser and denser. All of a sudden, as soon as he took a step forward, all the weak light completely disappeared. Han Shuo was suddenly plunged into complete darkness. It was also at this moment that Han Shuo suddenly discovered that there was no longer any elemental energy around him except for the purest element of darkness. Probing with his consciousness, Han Shuo discovered that he hadn't entered the region where the element of darkness was the densest. It was obvious that he hadn't truly entered the Shrine of Darkness. In this realm of absolute darkness, vision was completely useless. Han Shuo could only rely on the senses of his consciousness to move forward step by step. After an unknown period of time, Han Shuo suddenly discovered that he had arrived at a source of darkness. In front of him, the element of darkness was released and drifted in all directions. The incomparably vast element of darkness was as boundless as the widest ocean. It seemed that this was the source of the element of darkness that was scattered in every corner of the Elysium. The power of the quintessence. Han Shuo immediately knew that he had arrived at his destination and that he would soon be able to see the overgod of darkness. Only the power of the quintessence could be so terrifying and seemingly endless. It was also only the power of the quintessence that could give off an unparalleled, powerful deterrent force. Cough, cough. Han Shuo cleared his throat twice, intending to reveal his identity. It was at this moment that he suddenly discovered that the element of darkness around him had changed. It suddenly pressed down on him. In an instant, the seemingly endless element of darkness condensed together and enveloped every part of Han Shuo's body like a cage. It surged towards him with great force. Han Shuo's heart jolted. He felt an incomparably terrifying pressure from the energy that was surging towards him. Without a second thought, the body that was barely fused together using the energy of space split into two. The two avatars suddenly dispersed. Han Shuo had never been able to fuse the two avatars back together. Although he looked like a single person on normal days, when the two avatars clashed with each other in battle, it would be extremely disadvantageous for him. Han Shuo wouldn't need to make a fuss over a minor character. He could just fuse the two avatars back together. However, this time, he was facing an overgod of the quintessence. Han Shuo dared not let his guard down. The two avatars separated far away from each other. Two divine energies that obviously clashed with each other were unleashed from both sides. Han Shuo didn't care what the overgod of darkness was up to, but he immediately formed the strongest barrier he could to protect himself. The two avatars that were supposed to deal with a pseudo-overgod like Jar suddenly felt an incomparably powerful pressure. Under the influence of the quintessence, the endless element of darkness seemed to be mutating. It kept fusing together and turned into droplets of pure energy of darkness. Every single drop seemed to possess the power of a high god. Suddenly, those droplets of darkness once again fused together and turned into a vast ocean that drowned Han Shuo. The ocean of elemental energy turned into an enormous whirlpool of darkness. It pulled both Han Shuo's avatars into it and spun at high speed. It seemed as though it would devour everything in its path. Every time that enormous whirlpool of darkness spun, Han Shuo's two avatars would weaken a little. In just a few moments, it seemed as though the defenses of the two avatars would be completely crushed. Han Shuo was greatly alarmed. He suddenly felt that he had been rather rash in coming to someone else's lairs. After he arrived, he didn't even have the time to say a word before the overgod of darkness attacked him. And judging from the power of the attack, it seemed as though it could threaten his life. His two avatars seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The power of an overgod of the quintessence was indeed incomparably powerful. Chapter 1001. For a moment, Han Shuo really couldn't figure out what the Darkness Core God was trying to do. Seeing his two avatars weakening as the defense of the Dark Vortex weakened, Han Shuo felt as if he was facing a great enemy. He used all his energy to resist the powerful will of the darkness core god. It was only at this moment that Han Shuo realized that the power of his two avatars that hadn't fused together was limited. They weren't a match for the quintessence core god. The two different powers were gradually being whittled away by the dark vortex. Han Shuo felt a sense of helplessness in his heart. All he could do was try to fuse the two powers together. From Han Shuo's point of view, as long as he could fuse the powers of his two avatars together, he wouldn't have to fear the darkness core god. It was a pity that fusing 13 different powers was too difficult. It was practically a fantasy for him to achieve a breakthrough in such a short period of time. Seeing the power of his two avatars gradually being whittled away, Han Shuo grew anxious. All of a sudden, an idea flashed past Han Shuo's mind. Since it might be impossible to fuse them together temporarily, then let's try to clash our powers together. With a thought, Han Shuo's two avatars suddenly approached each other. The power that was originally used to defend himself suddenly transformed into two cone-shaped charging forces that clashed fiercely against each other like a long dragon. An earth-shattering explosion rang out from the center of the collision between the two new divine powers. Terrifying energy ripples erupted like a flash flood, spreading in all directions. In that instant, both of Han Shuo's avatars felt the powerful impact. They were sent flying out from the center of the dark vortex, escaping the entrapment of the dark vortex. Delighted, Han Shuo didn't even think about it. He hurried back the way he came, heading toward the area where the element of darkness was thinner. Ha! A surprised exclamation came from the area where the quintessence was located in front of Han Shuo. He seemed to be wondering why Han Shuo's two avatars were able to escape the influence of his darkness quintessence. At this time, Han Shuo did not care what he was thinking. He desperately retreated outside, hoping to get as far away from the area where the godhoods were. Alas, Han Shuo had underestimated the power of the quintessence over God. Suddenly, the boundless darkness spread out and engulfed Han Shuo as he moved. No matter where Han Shuo fled to, he couldn't see his own hand in front of his face, and the thick element of darkness kept a close eye on him. However, Han Shuo's speed was too fast, and even the core deity of darkness couldn't form another dark whirlpool to pull Han Shuo into it. Crack, crack, crack. Crack, crack, crack. A peculiar voice descended from the sky. An earth-shattering energy of destruction pressed down on Han Shuo. Han Shuo, who was in the midst of escaping, turned pale with fright. Before he could evade, he was stopped by the energy of destruction. His two avatars fell to the ground. At the same time, a cold light of death appeared in front of Han Shuo. Nestet's blurry figure gradually became clearer under the light of death. The quintessence of destruction and death clearly appeared beside Han Shuo. Han Shuo's limbs turned cold. He calmed down when he saw the three quintessence overgods appear at the same time. From Han Shuo's point of view, it would be very difficult for him to leave this place now that the three overgods were here. Even if his two avatars were destroyed here, his main body would still be in the pandemonium. Han Shuo hardened his heart and forcefully twisted his two avatars together. A spatial rift split him into two. Han Shuo suddenly clasped his left and right hands together. In an instant, incomparably shocking energy waves erupted from Han Shuo's body. With Han Shuo's two hands as a bridge, Han Shuo's two avatars collided and exploded at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. An unforgettable pain came from the souls of both avatars. It was a heart-wrenching pain. All this while, Han Shuo's two avatars had never dared to touch each other with their left and right limbs. That was because Han Shuo had tested it before. Whenever his two hands touched, his two avatars would immediately feel as though their souls were on fire. It was an indescribable pain. The pain was 10 times more intense than when Han Shuo's body underwent a metamorphosis when he broke through to the Skybreak realm. It wasn't something that an ordinary life form could endure. Had it not been for the cultivation of demonic arts that had given Han Shuo an abnormally high level of endurance, the pain from the contact between his hands would have shattered his divine soul. However, Han Shuo also discovered that once his two bodies touched each other, under the unbearable pain, the collision of the two bodies would erupt with a terrifying energy field. This was a move that would destroy indiscriminately. Wow! Amazing! Not bad! The three exclaimed at the same time. The three quintessence overgods came from three different directions. When they saw Han Shua's two hands clasped together and the terrifying energy field, they were clearly shocked. At that moment, Han Shua's eyes widened. His expression was ferocious as he glared at Nestet. The terrifying energy field instantly converged into rays from Han Shua's eyes and suddenly shot toward Nestet. Nestet's expression changed, and he cried out in alarm, "Oh no!" He dodged in a panic. "Brian, don't be rash. We mean no harm. Omphalos was just testing you just now." Nestet hurriedly waved his hand after dodging the ray attack from Han Shua's eyes, telling Han Shua not to act rashly. As Nestet spoke, the endless darkness seemed to have been pulled away, and the cold moonlight shone down once more. It was also at this moment that a handsome young man with a cold expression and a tall, burly man appeared from the darkness. Both of them stared at Han Shua, and their eyes shone with a strange light. The quintessence energy that only an overgod possessed was incomparably clear. Han Shua, who was about to go all out against Nestet and the others, hesitated when he heard Nestet's words and saw the two overgods of darkness and destruction. He hesitated for a moment before slowly releasing his hands. All of a sudden, the terrifying energy field disappeared without a trace. Han Shua's eyes were fixed on Nestet and the others. His loosened hands shone with light, and the space between his hands shone with a colorful light. It was as if there was a space inside that was constantly playing out the heavens and the earth, and strands of strange energy surged over from the endless plane of existence. Han Shua did not know if Nestet's words were true or not. Therefore, he was prepared to attack as soon as the situation took a turn for the worse. There was only a fist's distance between his hands. The heart-wrenching pain suddenly vanished. Han Shua took a deep breath as he sensed the space between his two fists collapsing. His unfriendly gaze landed on the handsome young man with the quintessence of darkness. In Han Shua's eyes, the overgod of darkness was young, had a somewhat cold expression, and looked incomparably handsome. However, when Han Shua probed with his consciousness, he discovered that apart from the energy of the quintessence of darkness, there was also an ancient and vicissitude aura on the overgod. It was as though the overgod had seen through everything in the world. Han Shua understood that although the overgod looked young, he had lived for an incomparably long time. Perhaps not even profound continent had existed as long as the overgod. While Han Shua was sizing up the overgod of darkness, Omphalos, the overgod of darkness was also sizing up Han Shua with his pitch-black eyes. After a while, Omphalos nodded and said in a gentle voice, "Not bad. You are qualified to speak to us." After a short pause, Omphalos said, "You killed 2 of my city lords in the darkness dominion. I have to teach you a little lesson." "I only attacked to see if you are qualified to speak to us," the burly man with the energy of destruction grinned. Nestet, Omphalos, and the gods of destruction all exuded an ancient aura. Although the 3 of them appeared to be young, Han Shua knew that their long lives were not something he could compare with. Han Shua stared blankly for a moment, but he did not dare to let his guard down. He carefully observed the 3's expressions and mannerisms, but he could not find any clues from them. Han Shua pondered for a moment. He felt that the 3 didn't summon him here with the intention of killing him. Putting aside his usefulness to Eternia, if Nestet really wanted to deal with him in the Death Dominion, it would be very difficult for Han Shua to defend against him. After exchanging blows with the Master God of Darkness Omphalos, Han Shua realized that the 13 great forces that had not been merged were not a match for the Master God of Quintessence. Only when the 13 great forces were merged, or when the demonic Yuan in his main body mutated and became a demon master, would he be able to fight the Master God of Quintessence. Han Shua believed that when his main body became a demon master and the 13 great forces merged into one, no Master God of Quintessence would be a match for him. After a long silence, Han Shua gradually relaxed. He no longer looked at the 3 of them as if he was facing a great enemy. He slowly retracted his hands that were only a fist away from each other and slowly lowered them. Seeing Han Shua's action, Nestet smiled. He knew that Han Shuo believed them. "I didn't expect you to take such trivial matters to heart," Han Shuo said with a smile as he looked at the master god of darkness Amphalos. Although Han Shuo said those words in a relaxed manner, he knew that if he were in Han Shuo's shoes, he wouldn't have minded it so easily. Amphalos was rather surprised. He did not expect that Han Shuo could recover from the incident so quickly. Although he nodded in his mind, he said in an indifferent tone, "Wallace and Hofs had been city lords for so many years. Even if they didn't make any contributions, they still worked hard. It's not right for me to let you get rid of them just like that. Let's forget about it for now. I won't pursue the matter any further. We can talk about some things." "What do you want to talk about?" asked Han Shuo. He looked at the three inquisitively. He was rather excited. They had traveled thousands of miles from the fringe to this place, disregarding the dangers they faced, just to uncover some secrets. Han Shuo was rather excited when Amphalos brought up serious business. Amphalos turned to Nestet and pondered for a moment before he said, "Let's talk about how the Battle of the Gods will be conducted and about Eternia." Chapter 1002. The War of the Gods and Eternia were the two things that had been on Han Shuo's mind for the past few years. Both the goddess of destiny and the god of light had vaguely mentioned those two things when they met with Han Shuo. To Han Shuo, the War of the Gods and Eternia were major events that concerned him and the survival of the fringe. These two events involved the 12 overgods of the quintessence and the 12 dominions. Unfortunately, neither the god of light nor the goddess of destiny had revealed any information to Han Shuo about these two things. Han Shuo had tried to find out more about them but to no avail. Now that the War of the Gods had begun, the dominions of light, life, water, darkness, destruction, and death had officially begun their confrontation. A change that would engulf the entire Elysium was about to begin. According to Nestet, no region would be able to escape from this great whirlpool, not even the weakest fringe. At this critical moment, Han Shuo still knew nothing about the War of the Gods and Eternia. This was a fatal weakness. The reason Han Shuo had risked his life to come to the Dominion of Darkness was to find out the ins and outs of these two events. Now that Amphalos wanted to talk about it, he couldn't contain his excitement. "Oh?" Han Shuo raised his eyebrows and said, "I know nothing about the War of the Gods and Eternia. I hope the three of you can explain it to me first." Amphalos shot a glance at Nestet and pondered for a moment before turning to the gods of destruction. When the two nodded, Amphalos said to Han Shuo, "Let's talk inside." Amphalos strode into the region where Han Shuo had come from. Nestet and the gods of destruction followed Amphalos without hesitation. Han Shuo raised his head and saw an enormous palace piercing through the clouds in the place that was previously shrouded in boundless darkness. The palace was 10 times larger than the Pandemonium and looked like several mountains piled on top of each other. Han Shuo felt a sense of reverence at first glance. Seeing that Amphalos and the two gods of destruction had turned into small dots shooting into the enormous palace, Han Shuo hesitated for a moment before following suit. Han Shuo gradually calmed down. Suddenly, he sensed that the enormous palace was like a terrifying whirlpool. Apart from the element of darkness that was 100 times denser than the Pandemonium, there were wisps of extremely weak, bizarre energy converging from all directions and slowly flowing into the enormous palace. With a thought, Han Shuo carefully sensed for a moment, and immediately discovered that the strands of extremely weak energy were the power of faith of the overgod of darkness. The power of faith was endless, and there were hundreds of millions of strands flowing into him like tiny streams. Looking at Amphalos, Han Shuo discovered that as soon as he entered the Shrine of Darkness, the millions of wisps of power of faith began to converge towards him. Han Shuo squinted his eyes and suddenly discovered that the power of faith in the eyes of his two avatars had turned into colorful rays of light. The enormous Shrine of Darkness was like a gigantic monster that opened its bloody mouth to devour the power of faith of the believers of the overgod of darkness from all material planes. Some of those wisps were as thick as an arm, while others were thousands of times thinner than a hair. After sensing for a moment, Han Shuo quickly discovered that the wisps of power of faith that were as thick as an arm contained a faint aura of a high god. As for the wisps of power of faith that were thousands of times thinner than a hair, they were so weak that Han Shuo couldn't even detect them. After sensing for a moment, Han Shuo immediately understood that the more powerful a being was and the more powerful their soul energy was, the thicker the amount of power of faith they contributed to the overgod of darkness. As for the wisps of power of faith that were thousands of times thinner than a hair, they came from the commoners of some low-level material planes. The majestic shrine of darkness pierced through the clouds. After Han Shuo entered, he discovered that Omphalos, Nestet, and the gods of destruction Gurado were already waiting for him at the center of the shrine. Behind the center of the shrine was a deep and boundless void. It seemed as though it led to another material plane. Colorful rays of light could be seen radiating from it. An enormous whirlpool of darkness was slowly moving like a colossal monster. A portion of the power of faith that had gathered from various material planes entered Omphalos, while a larger portion flowed into the deep, starry space behind Omphalos. In that space, the power of faith was everywhere and was flowing slowly like a vast ocean. Seeing that Han Shuo had followed them in, Nestet pointed at the deep, starry space behind Omphalos that was constantly changing. He said to Han Shuo, "This is the ocean of faith, the place where the divinity is soaked." Hearing that Nestet was talking about serious matters, Han Shuo immediately focused and hurriedly asked, "Ocean of faith? Soaking the divinity? The divinity needs to be nourished by the ocean of faith? If we want to unleash the power of the divinity, we must constantly replenish the power of faith for the divinity. Every once in a while, the divinity must be soaked in the ocean of faith so that it is cleansed by the ocean of faith. Only then can we continue to utilize the power of the divinity." Omphalos explained solemnly as he looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo had never known that the divinity had to be so carefully protected. He had thought that once an overgod obtained the divinity, he would be able to utilize the power of the divinity without any restrictions. Back when he was on Profound Continent, Han Shuo discovered that all the low-level material planes were filled with shrines. Each and every shrine was collecting believers for their overgods so that their souls could provide an endless supply of power of faith to their overgods. Originally, Han Shuo had thought that the power of faith could increase the power of the domain of divinity. It was not until today that he realized that faith could play such an important role for an overgod. It seemed that the reason why they could constantly utilize the power of the divinity was closely related to the power of faith of their believers. It was no wonder that even in low-level material planes, they would spare no effort in plundering the power of faith. What happens if the divinity is not replenished by faith, and if the divinity is not cleansed by the ocean of faith? Han Shuo asked straightforwardly after thinking for a moment. If that happens, we, whose divine souls have fused with the divinity, will die. To be precise, our divine souls will be obliterated by the divinity, but the divinity will still exist and wait for someone else to fuse with it, Omphalos explained solemnly with a sullen face. In other words, if all beings on material planes no longer believe in you, when the power of faith in the ocean of faith is exhausted, you will be abandoned by the divinity and replaced by someone else. Han Shuo was astonished. That's right. Omphalos nodded. After a moment of hesitation, he continued to explain, the divinity shard is a special treasure. Since it is a divine artifact that contains the divinity, once we run out of faith to maintain the divinity, it will immediately abandon us and choose the god who fused with the divinity shard. After obtaining the divinity shard, the gods who possess it can burn it to provide new power of faith. This is because the divinity shard is formed by fusing the power of faith with special substances. The new overgod only needs to obtain enough power of faith from living beings before the divinity shard is completely burned. That way, even if the divinity shard is completely burned, the divinity will be able to sustain itself with the support of an endless supply of power of faith. Can the overgods without the divinity shard obtain the divinity shard after their divine souls are obliterated? Han Shuo was taken aback and asked again. The one who answered was the gods of destruction Gurado. He grinned and said, "Only if no one in this line has the divinity shard. Only then will the divinity choose them. Once they fuse with the divinity, they will immediately need a huge amount of power of faith to maintain the divinity. If they don't have enough power of faith, their divine souls will be obliterated by the divinity. Generally speaking, this is not a big possibility. We will not allow pseudo-overgods who cultivate the same line to have the power of faith that can threaten us." After a moment of hesitation, Gurado glanced at Nestet and said, "This is also why Nestet doesn't care about so-called powerful pseudo-overgods like Rog and Dagmar, and spares no effort to attack Han Hao, who has yet to enter the pseudo-overgod realm but has a divinity shard." Nestet wasn't angry at Gurado for using him as an example. He nodded and said, "To us, a god with a divinity shard, even if he is only a lesser deity, is 100 times more threatening than a pseudo-overgod without a divinity shard." At this point, Nestet smiled lightly and looked deeply at Han Shua. He said, "If it wasn't for Han Hao suddenly forming a new divinity shard, I wouldn't have given face even if it was the goddess of destiny. I would have definitely destroyed him." Han Shua snorted when he heard Nestet mention the past. He said, "It seems that gods with divinity shards can replace you as long as they can destroy the power of faith of your believers. Hee, I thought that you guys with divinity shards are immortal. There is no such thing as an undying being." Gurado couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and said, "Didn't the powerful existence that brought you here from another universe perish in the hands of the All-Mother? Didn't the All-Mother, the so-called eternal existence, slumber in Eternia and almost perish as well?" Han Shua's expression changed slightly at those words. Before today, Han Shua had learned all about Gu Tianxia, the exalted demon lord's deeds, from the cauldron of Myriad Demon. Although he had a hunch that the 12 overgods knew who he wasn't certain. It was only now that Han Shua was certain that the 12 overgods knew who he was. It was laughable that he had been so careful ever since he came to Elysium, fearing that his secret would be discovered. It turned out that his existence had always been under their noses. "So you didn't take care of me in the Darkness Dominion because of the goddess of destiny?" Han Shua couldn't help but smile bitterly at Amphalos. The corners of Amphalos' mouth curled into a disdainful smile. He said with certainty, "Give her face? She's not that important." "In that case, I don't owe the goddess of destiny any favors," Han Shua said with a chuckle. Chapter 1003. Why did you tell me about the connection between the Ocean of Faith and the Quintessence? What do they have to do with the Battle of the Gods and Eternia? Han Shua asked. "I just want you to know that we aren't irreplaceable on Elysium. Besides, we've always been bound by the Quintessence," Amphalos said. "Just like how we receive faith from the souls of our believers, we also need to use the power of the Quintessence to provide faith to another. A large portion of the faith we gather from the various planes is used on the Quintessence, which in turn gives it to the All-Mother." Nestet's expression was grave. "To put it bluntly, us 12 Quintessence overgods are merely the All-Mother's servants. She uses us to control the faith of all living beings. If we can't provide enough faith for the Quintessence, we'll be replaced." Both Amphalos and Gurado's expressions darkened. Han Shua's expression changed. So there was such a secret behind all this. It seemed that being a Quintessence overgod wasn't an easy job after all. The creator deities used the power of the 12 Quintessence to control the 12 overgods and use them to absorb faith from all living beings. While the 12 Quintessence overgods seemed to have a lot of power, they were all just making things easier for the creator deities. While they could maintain their transcendent status and use the power of the Quintessence, they had strict conditions. They couldn't take the initiative at all. "How dare you talk to me like that?" Han Shua said. "According to what you said, you'll never be able to escape the creator deity's control. Do you think you'll be able to survive if she learns of this?" "Things are different now." Gurado smiled and took a deep breath. He stared at Han Shua and said, "Many, many years ago, an incredibly powerful being tore a rift between the two universes and arrived here. His power was incomparably terrifying. The 12 overgods and the ancestral mother goddess felt that terrifying power. You should know who I'm talking about. Han Shuo nodded. Of course, he knew that Han Shuo was talking about Demon Lord Gu Tianxia. With the rapid breakthrough of Han Shuo's strength, he vaguely realized the terrifying power of Demon Lord Gu Tianxia. Now that his consciousness had reached the level of a demonic lord, he was certain that once his body was reborn, he wouldn't need to fear any quintessence overgod. Gu Tianxia, the exalted demon lord, was even stronger. Who in this universe could possibly be his match? Who would be able to hurt him? The answer was self-evident. Naturally, it was the All-Mother that they were talking about. I know who it is. Go on. Han Shuo waved his hand and concentrated on Gurado. He tore through the endless obstacles of the two universes, and his physical body suddenly descended. At that moment, the 12 of us received the order of the Mother of Creation at the same time. We gathered around the Mother of Creation and immediately attacked that person who had yet to recover. Gurado straightened his back and smiled wryly. You can't imagine how terrifying that battle was. Many small planes disappeared in that battle. The 12 of us were only responsible for holding him back. The one who truly attacked was the All-Mother. After so many years, I still feel uneasy whenever I think of that person. Apart from the All-Mother, I can't imagine anyone as strong as him, strong enough to destroy a plane with a wave of his hand. It's too terrifying. Omphalos sighed. Hearing Gurado mention Gu Tianxia, Omphalos sighed. This was the first time Han Shuo had heard of Gu Tianxia's strength. The fact that he could destroy a plane with a wave of his hand was indeed shocking. When he first obtained the memories of the demonic arts, he still had some doubts about the earth-shattering power. But now, he knew that wasn't the most powerful thing. He's completely dead, Han Shuo said softly. He was quite clear about what happened after that. Omphalos and the others didn't think Gu Tianxia's death was due to his lack of strength. The three exchanged glances and smiled wryly. Gurado pondered for a moment before continuing. His defeat wasn't because he was weaker than the All-Mother. It was probably because he exhausted too much energy tearing through space. Otherwise, it would have been hard to say who would have won. Even so, the All-Mother was heavily injured. After a pause, Omphalos's expression turned cold. At that moment, the All-Mother suddenly attacked. Our quintessences lost control, and our souls and quintessences fell toward her. At that time, we clearly felt the power of faith and divine energy we had gathered over hundreds of millions of years surging toward her. At the same time, she was rapidly recovering. If that person hadn't used a divine artifact to launch a final attack before leaving, our souls and quintessences would have been taken away by her. At that time, we would have completely disappeared, and she would have recovered very quickly. Amon's face turned cold as he said, "It was only then that we suddenly realized that perhaps we were just cattle and sheep that could be slaughtered at any time. We have to thank that person. Otherwise, we would have never known who we were." Gurado took a deep breath and said, "That person's final attack before he left caused her to suffer even more injuries. At that time, we who should have firmly stood on her side began to hesitate." She understood the situation better than anyone else. She seemed to know that we had thoughts of betrayal, so she immediately used her remaining power to enter the castle in the sky. Before she closed the castle in the sky, she once said that all the power in our bodies was bestowed upon us by her. She said that the power in this universe would never be able to open the castle in the sky, and that as long as she recovered, she would take back everything that she had bestowed upon us. Of course, she wasn't only referring to our quintessences, but also our lives. Omphalos smiled bitterly. She had absolute confidence in herself. Even if that person escaped, there would have been lethal energy left on him. She was sure that he wouldn't be able to survive. Gurado said, "That was indeed the case. That person didn't manage to escape and completely perished. However, she didn't expect that person to have a means to counterattack before he died. She actually managed to forcibly bring your soul from another universe." After a short pause, Gurado continued, "We only learned about you from the goddess of destiny later on. It wasn't until you set foot on Elysium that we were able to confirm what kind of power you had. Our divine souls and quintessences have long since fused together, so we can't cultivate another power. That's why we can only pin our hopes on you. We hope that you'll be able to open the castle in the sky." Those words had a huge impact on Han Shuo. Only now did he truly understand what had happened back then, as well as the old grudge between Gu Tianxie and the All-Mother. The All-Mother was currently recuperating in the castle in the sky. Once she felt that she had enough power to deal with the 12 quintessence overgods, she would naturally emerge from the castle in the sky. The 12 quintessence overgods were aware of this, but they were powerless to do anything about it. Although they seemed to be living a good life, they were constantly under the shadow of the All-Mother. "You're saying that you plan to open the castle in the sky and kill her before she fully recovers?" Han Shuo immediately understood Nestet's plan. Without hiding anything, Kratos nodded and said, "That's right. We don't have a choice. Once she accumulates enough power, she'll naturally come out and take back our divine souls and quintessence. We've been her puppets for billions of years. We've given her most of the power of faith we've obtained. If she wants to kill us, we can't just sit around and do nothing. If that person hadn't appeared, we wouldn't have been able to resist her even if we knew that we were nothing more than her livestock. After all, she's far stronger than us. The 12 of us together wouldn't have been enough to deal with her. Fortunately, that person's appearance gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. With her injuries, we don't have to be so passive anymore," said Dark Mantle excitedly. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. He stared at the three of them carefully and suddenly asked, "Judging from your expressions, it doesn't seem to be as simple as killing her. Is there something in the castle in the sky that you've been yearning for?" Nestet, Dark Mantle, and Gurado's eyes flickered, but they didn't answer. Han Shuo immediately understood that there must be something in the All-Mother that attracted them. The fact that the 3 quintessence overgods were so excited in front of Han Shuo meant that they were coveting something that had broken their state of mind. Seeing that the 3 didn't want to reveal anything, Han Shuo didn't want to get to the bottom of it. That thing was too far away for him right now. He'll find a way to ask when he's actually going to open the castle in the sky. "I know a little about the castle in the sky, but why are you in such a hurry to enter the battle of the gods?" asked Han Shuo. "We can feel that the quintessence is demanding more and more power of faith. It's getting out of our control. Although we can't sense her presence, the quintessence's abnormality shows that her control over it has deepened. Although we've tried our best to control it, there's not much we can do. The goddess of destiny said that she'll come out of the castle in the near future. We don't have much time left." Dark Mantle looked at Han Shuo with a heavy expression and continued, "The battle of the gods is the key to opening the castle in the sky. Now that you're strong enough, we're in a hurry to leave." Han Shuo was stunned. He felt sorry for Nestet and the others. It seemed that the All-Mother was too much of a threat to them. Han Shuo felt a chill in his heart when he heard that she would come out of the castle in the sky soon. He knew that his existence was a greater threat to the All-Mother. Once she came out of the castle in the sky, the first one to need her help wouldn't be the 12 quintessence overgods, but him. Chapter 1004. As for why the War of the Gods must begin immediately, it is because even though she is in Eternia, she can still affect the 12 quintessences. For example, recently, we have been able to sense that the quintessences are trying to break free from the shackles of our divine souls and return to Eternia. Omphalos looked at Han Shuo and continued, "It has been about 50,000 years since she entered Eternia. We don't know if she has regained some of her strength, but we have also sensed a powerful suction force from Eternia. Under such a powerful suction force, our quintessences are starting to lose control and are trying to break free from us and fall into Eternia." It was at this time that the goddess of destiny discovered the problem. She discovered that by filling the mirror of destiny with a certain amount of divine souls, she can affect the suction force from Eternia. Han Shuo's face jolted and he said in a deep voice, "That is to say, she can only stop the suction force from Eternia by sending divine souls into the mirror of destiny." After hesitating for a moment, Han Shuo continued, The war that breaks out on Elysium every once in a while is part of your plan. You deliberately sacrifice enough divine souls to fill the mirror of destiny to resist the suction force from Eternia? That's right. Omphalos did not deny it. He said, we will also take the war of the gods seriously. It would be perfect if we could sacrifice our own people to fill the mirror of destiny. So every time the goddess of destiny intervenes, it means that the mirror of destiny has been supplied with enough divine soul energy? Han Shuo was stunned. Omphalos nodded again. Han Shuo took a deep breath and his face was filled with astonishment. He did not expect that the so-called War of the Gods would have such a huge secret. It was no wonder that the War of the Gods was inevitable. Suddenly, a strange light flashed in Han Shuo's mind. He suddenly recalled some of Hegemon Ka's memories. He stared at Omphalos and asked, "You want to protect your subordinates. Why do you allow the god hunters to do as they please? I've heard that if there are too many gods in a certain religion, their quintessences will be affected. Is there such a thing?" Omphalos was also slightly surprised and said, "You actually know about this?" Nodding his head, Omphalos said, "There is indeed such a thing, but it is somewhat different from what you know. In addition to the replenishment of the power of faith and the cleansing of the sea of faith, the godhood also needs the continuous death of gods of the same system. Their deaths are also the foundation to maintain the godhood." Han Shuo was stunned when he heard this. According to what Omphalos had said, the quintessence was a little too miraculous. It was as if all the gods who cultivated in the same energy were just food for the quintessence. The quintessence seemed to be using their lives as food. It needed to constantly replenish itself, but it couldn't eat too much at once. At this point, Han Shuo had more or less understood some of the secrets about the battle of the gods, Eternia, Gu Tianxia the exalted demon lord, and the creator deities. However, Han Shuo still didn't know why Nestet, Gurado, and Omphalos had invited him here. "Alright, now can we talk about what you have invited me here to cooperate with?" Han Shuo had completely understood. He took a deep breath and saw that his unusually excited state of mind was slowly calming down. Only then did he open his mouth to ask. Nestet and the other two, who had been patiently telling Han Shuo about the battle of the gods and Eternia, suddenly fell into a collective silence after Han Shuo asked this question. "What's wrong?" Han Shuo was a little puzzled. "That's not it." Nestet smiled and glanced at Omphalos and Gurado. He asked, "Do you think he's qualified to be on our side?" Omphalos and Gurado carefully sized up Han Shuo. After hesitating for a while, they nodded indifferently. "That's good." Nestet said, "We hope that you'll be on our side during the battle of the gods and try to minimize our losses. Also, when we're in Eternia, we hope that you'll work together with the three of us to advance and retreat together." "What do I get in return?" Han Shuo hesitated for a moment before asking. "Originally, according to the agreement, once Eternia is broken, you'll lose your value, and we'll get rid of you first. After all, that person's power is too terrifying, and you'll be a great threat in the future." Nestet said solemnly, "However, if you agree to advance and retreat together with us, once Eternia is broken, we'll do our best to protect you. As for the future, we'll come to a conclusion after the matter with Eternia is over." Han Shuo knew that once he opened Eternia, he would lose his value. It was only natural that the 12 quintessence overgods would abandon him. Gu Tianxia the demon lord was too much of a deterrent to them. Even if the 12 of them worked together to destroy the creator deities, Han Shuo's existence was still the biggest threat. It was only natural that they wouldn't allow him to live. "You mean that after Eternia is broken, when others plan to attack me, you'll help me deal with them and protect me from being killed? And when the matter with Eternia is over, we'll go our separate ways?" Han Shuo asked with a strange expression. "That's right." Nestet nodded. "What's in Eternia?" Han Shuo snorted coldly. The three's expressions changed slightly. Nestet pondered for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Something that can become the new creator deities. This is just the goddess of destiny's guess. We don't know if it's true or not. But whether it's true or not, we'll fight for it with all our might." Something that can become the new creator deities. Han Shuo was shocked. The 12 quintessence overgods were ambitious. As expected, they didn't just want to rebel for the control of the creator deities. It seemed that the thing that could become the new creator deities was their real goal. A series of thoughts flashed through Han Shua's mind. Han Shua's eyes shone brightly as he carefully considered the three's proposal. After a while, Han Shua said, "Once I open Eternia, I'll be killed immediately. What does the goddess of destiny think about this?" Gurado had a strange expression on his face, and his lips curled into a strange smile. "What does she think?" Hee, this idea was put forward by her in the first place. Han Shua's heart sank. After a while, he nodded and said, "All right, I'll cooperate with you as well." Han Shua didn't expect this idea to be put forward by the goddess of destiny. He observed Nestet, Dark Mantle, and Gurado. From the strange expressions on their faces and the calmness of their auras, he suddenly felt that they were speaking the truth. He didn't expect that the goddess of destiny, whom he had a good impression of, would be the one who put forward this idea. Han Shua suddenly realized that the goddess of destiny was the most uncertain factor among the 12 quintessence overgods. And he had always thought that the goddess of destiny could help him the most. Hee, you agreed so easily? Gurado asked with a smile. "I'm not even a match for one Omphalos, and now all 12 overgods are ganging up on me. Hee, no matter how many lives I have, it's not going to be enough." Han Shua shrugged and smiled bitterly. He knew that once the matter in Eternia was over, no matter who obtained the treasure that could lead to the new creator deities, they would be the first to kill him. This was something that no one could change. But as long as he could avoid being targeted by the 12 overgods at the very beginning, who knew what would happen after he entered Eternia? "If that's the case, then let's discuss the details," Omphalos nodded. Inside the Shrine of Darkness, Han Shua and the 3 overgods of death, destruction, and darkness discussed the details of their cooperation, including how the Fringe would participate in the War of the Gods, and how they would deal with the other gods in Eternia, ******* at the same time, at the center of the Shrine of Destiny in the Destiny Dominion. The goddess of destiny stood in front of a mirror that had the sun, moon, and stars in it. She shot out a beam of dazzling white light from her palm into the center of the mirror. After the white light in the goddess of destiny's hand fell into the mirror suddenly changed. The stars in it exploded in an instant, turning into cosmic dust or flying meteors. The cosmic dust slowly gathered and gradually formed new planes. Various types of energy flowed in, and some light from the depths of the universe fell on those planes, giving birth to life. The destruction and reassembly of a universe, the birth and death of a plane, the birth and death of a life, and many other scenes appeared on the mirror. Suddenly, like the scene in the mirror, strands of white lines visible to the naked eye connected to all the living beings on the plane, resonating with their souls. She fiddled with one of the white lines, and with a flash of light, an unfamiliar life appeared. His birth, aging, sickness, and death, as well as the scenes he had experienced and was about to experience, all played out at a speed visible to the naked eye. Nothing could escape the goddess of destiny's observation. It was a beautiful work of art. The goddess of destiny twined a few thin lines together with her slender hands and gently pulled. The thin lines broke, and the life wrapped around them suddenly died. A ball of white light burst out of the goddess of destiny's hand and covered all the thin lines. Suddenly, all the thin lines disappeared, and a blurry scene appeared in the center of the mirror. In the center of the mirror was the Shrine of Darkness. In a huge stone room with a deep starry sky and a dark whirlpool, Nestet, Omphalos, Gurado, and Han Shua were concentrating on a discussion. Han Shua, Nestet, Omphalos, and Gurado didn't know that the goddess of destiny could have such a magical power to spy on them from the distant Destiny Dominion. At this time, they were still discussing how to deal with the Battle of the Gods, how to open Sky Castle, and how to cooperate after Sky Castle was opened. The goddess of destiny's eyes shone with a strange light. She stared at the scene in the mirror for a while, and suddenly reached out to wipe away the scene that appeared in the mirror. Her lips curled into a slightly cold smile. Chapter 1005. Deep beneath the pandemonium in the land of chaos, at the center of the ninth realm mystical Een harvester was a secret chamber where all the mystical Een energy on Elysium was gathered. Han Shua's body was sitting cross-legged, motionless. Electric sparks were coiling around his body like tiny snakes. For the past few years, Han Shua had left most of the fringe and pandemonium's affairs to his family members. His two avatars would take care of certain matters that he absolutely had to attend to. His main body, on the other hand, had remained in the chamber, slowly refining his body with the mystical Een energy. Han Shua's consciousness had been in a dormant state all these years, digesting the comprehension of the demonic arts he had obtained from the cauldron of myriad demon. The mystical Een aura of heaven and earth on Elysium was indeed extremely dense. Under the effect of the ninth realm mystical Een harvester, the mystical Een aura that was drifting across the entire continent was drawn into this secret chamber like a stream of water. It was as though the mystical Een was being reborn. Han Shua's consciousness, which had been in a deep slumber for many years, suddenly trembled. A trace of mystical energy surged towards him. Han Shua, who had been in a deep slumber for many years, suddenly opened his eyes. His deep gaze seemed to transcend the distance of space and was suddenly projected into the distant dominion of destiny. Just a moment ago, Han Shua had sensed a faint energy ripple from the dominion of destiny. That faint energy ripple seemed to be related to him. His consciousness felt as though it was being spied on. Electric sparks flashed in Han Shua's eyes. Those electric sparks intertwined in the air in front of him, gathering more and more mystical Een energy in the secret chamber. Suddenly, Han Shua shut his eyes, severing the connection between his eyes and the electric sparks. Wisps of divine sense abruptly spread out in all directions with this secret room as the center. Mountains, lakes, forests, cities, life. With the pandemonium as the center, Han Shua's consciousness extended infinitely outwards. Soon, everything in the fringe had been seen. At this moment, Han Shua was the undisputed god of the fringe. In just a few seconds, everything in the fringe was reflected in Han Shua's consciousness. His consciousness didn't stop there. It surged towards the dominion of space and destiny. More sceneries and lives were reflected in Han Shua's consciousness. The wonderful feeling of being in control of everything was very comforting. Suddenly, Han Shua's divine sense stopped extending. His divine sense had reached the outside of the destiny dominion. As long as his divine sense took another step forward, it would be considered as entering the destiny dominion. He did not rashly venture deeper. His divine sense, which was about to surge into the space domain, suddenly stopped. Just like that, Han Shua's consciousness stopped in front of the destiny dominion. He slowly sensed the wondrous energy ripples coming from the destiny dominion. After a while, Han Shua suddenly discovered that the wondrous energy ripples had passed through the fringe, the death dominion, and reached the darkness dominion. In an instant, Han Shua retracted his divine sense and returned to the depths of the pandemonium in a few seconds. The Shrine of Destiny. The goddess of destiny, who had just erased the scenes in the mirror of destiny, suddenly looked in the direction of the fringe in astonishment. She saw some kind of starlight glowing around her. Just like the scene in the mirror of destiny, there seemed to be a sun, a moon, and a star that represented the birth and death of the world. After a long while, the light in the goddess of destiny's eyes disappeared. She let out a soft sigh and softly muttered, "What a terrifying vigilance." Unlike the energy of this universe, he can actually detect the energy ripples of fate in my dimension. I really wonder what he knows. The goddess of destiny shook her head. Her gaze seemed to pierce through space and landed on the fringe. She muttered again, "Andrina is still there. I hope she's fine. Asterisk, 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 the darkness dominion, the overgod's shrine." Han Shua's avatar, who was in the middle of a conversation with the overgods of death, destruction, and darkness, suddenly froze and immediately shut his mouth. Nestet and the other two were stunned. When they saw that Han Shua had suddenly stopped talking, they thought that Han Shua was dissatisfied with something. They looked at Han Shua with a puzzled expression. Nestet furrowed his brows and asked, "What's the problem?" Han Shuo didn't answer. He suddenly stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the deep starry sky. He took a deep breath and said with his back facing the three, "Perhaps the goddess of destiny already knows about us." Upon hearing this, Nestet, Omphalos, and Gurado's expressions changed slightly. "What do you mean?" Omphalos also stood up and slowly walked towards Han Shuo. As Omphalos was speaking, the quintessence that looked like a black crystal flew out from the back of his head and fell into the sea of faith. As soon as the quintessence entered the sea of faith, the power of faith in the sea of faith gushed into the quintessence. The power of faith in the sea of faith rapidly decreased. "You should know that this body isn't mine. The one in the depths of the pandemonium is my true body." While we were talking, my true body in the faraway pandemonium sensed an unusual fluctuation in the dominion of destiny. That faint energy fluctuation obviously came from the shrine of destiny. After a moment of hesitation, Han Shuo turned to look at the three who were listening attentively to him and said, "And it's coming from our direction." The eyes of Nestet and Gurado flickered. No one knew what they were thinking about. They simultaneously looked at the quintessence of darkness in the sea of faith. Omphalos stared fixedly at the quintessence of darkness. After a while, Omphalos suddenly nodded and said, "I sensed it a little. Although it receded very quickly, it must be her power." Han Shuo didn't know how Omphalos sensed it using the quintessence, but he seemed to have guessed it. "That bitch." Gurado grinned coldly and said, "She really thinks that she can control everything. So what if she knows? We don't have to care about her." Han Shuo was stunned. He looked at Gurado strangely, not understanding why the mighty gods of destruction would have such resentment. It seemed that he was very dissatisfied with the goddess of destiny. Gurado didn't explain his resentment towards the goddess of destiny. After letting out a cold snort, he said to Han Shuo, "Let's continue. Don't worry about her." Nestet and Omphalos frowned and didn't say anything. Seeing that the three didn't have a deep understanding of the goddess of destiny, Han Shuo didn't probe further. He nodded and continued to discuss with the three. 3 days later, Han Shuo walked out of the Black Domain Forest and headed towards Hushvale City. Upon arriving at Hushvale City, Han Shuo went straight to find Donna and found that Donna was already waiting for him in the room. Donna's face was filled with joy. When she saw Han Shuo, she immediately called out softly, "You're here?" Han Shuo took a step forward and grabbed Donna's hand. After sitting down, he smiled and said, "How is it? Did your father agree to let you leave with me?" "That's right. Ever since my father learned that you were invited here by the overgods of death, darkness, and destruction, he didn't try to stop me from returning to the land of chaos with you. He only told me to keep a low profile in the land of chaos, but not to suffer any grievances," said Donna with a sweet smile. "What are you talking about? What grievances can you suffer?" Han Shuo smiled and pulled Donna towards the exit. He said, "Since your father has nothing to say, let's go." You've reached an agreement with the three gods?" When Donna recalled that Han Shuo had communicated with the quintessence of darkness, death, and destruction, she was at a loss of what to do. She felt rather inferior and wondered what she could do to help Han Shuo in the future. Back when Han Shuo had just arrived on Elysium, Donna was able to help Han Shuo with her strength. But now, Han Shuo was like a lofty mountain that everyone revered. In her eyes, Han Shuo was getting further and further away from her. She didn't know what she should do. Other than that, she was also worried that Phoebe, Emily, and Fanny would target her. After all, the Han family and the House of Lavers used to have a grudge against each other. Before going to the Fringe, Donna had been looking forward to it all day long. But now that she was going to the Fringe, Donna was even more nervous. "Let's not return to the Fringe for now. Let's go somewhere else," said Han Shuo after leaving Hushvale City. "Where are we going?" asked Donna in astonishment. "The Dominion of Wind," replied Han Shuo. The Dominion of Wind, the Valley of Howling Winds. Fierce winds howled within the valley. The wind in the valley between the two mountain peaks was so strong that it was terrifying. Even huge rocks were lifted into the sky. At a glance, the wind howled and sand and stones flew in the valley, giving people a strong shock. The Valley of Howling Winds was the headquarters of the God Hunters in the Dominion of Wind. Not many people knew about it. Ever since Miller left and never returned, the God Hunters in the Valley of Howling Winds had been divided into several factions. Without Miller as their hegemon, they were all vying for the position of hegemon. I heard that the hegemon died in the fringe. Lately, a guy called Han Hao has been consolidating the God Hunter factions. He has taken in God Hunters from the dominions of earth, water, and fire. I heard that he has already moved to the Dominion of Wind, said a few people in a gloomy tone as the wind blew sand and pebbles in the valley. The God Hunter Alliance has its own rules. No hegemon should interfere with each other's business. I heard that Han Hao has a hegemon who controls the Dominion of Death. What right does he have to meddle in the affairs of other dominions? If he really dares to come to our Dominion of Wind and fight for the leadership of our Dominion of Wind, I, Naga, will be the first to not let him off. A thin, yellow-faced middle-aged man snorted coldly. It is said that Han Hao is extremely powerful. The God Hunters from the dominions of earth, water, and fire are no match for him at all. Anyone who dares to resist him is killed by him. I'm afraid that even we are no match for him, said one of them with a worried face. Gather all our forces in the Valley of Howling Winds. Let's put aside our prejudices for now and get rid of this outsider first. Even if the Dominion of Wind wants to choose a hegemon, it can only be us who cultivate in the element of wind. He won't get the chance, shouted Nagach. When he said that, the others nodded with sullen expressions, agreeing with what he said. Chapter 1006. Suddenly, a figure descended into the Valley of Winds and released a sinister energy. The God Hunters from Tanai's Dominion of Wind turned pale with fright. The next moment, whooshing sounds could be heard from outside the Valley of Winds. Many figures swarmed into Tanai. Amidst the flying sand and pebbles, the little skull Han Hao coldly appeared. He swept his sinister eyes across the crowd and said, "So, you are the God Hunter leaders of the Dominion of Wind?" A gigantic bone throne appeared in midair. Han Hao, who was looking down from above, unleashed a terrifying energy. Suddenly, the howling winds in the valley seemed to have encountered a powerful resistance. The mountain winds that had never stopped for many years gradually stopped. The God Hunter hegemons who were just discussing how to deal with Han Hao looked at Han Shuo in astonishment. Naga took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, "You are Han Hao?" Han Hao nodded slightly, looked down at Naga, and said, "You said that if I were to come here, I would be the first person you would kill?" Naga felt a chill in his heart. He did not dare to raise his head to look at Han Hao's sinister eyes. After stammering for a moment, he braced himself and said, "However, the hegemons of the Dominion of Wind can only be us who cultivate in the energy of wind. Outsiders are not allowed to interfere." Naga sensed terrifying energy undulations coming from Han Hao. He was not confident at all. Han Hao, who was sitting on his bone throne, suddenly attacked. A bone spear descended from the sky and pierced towards Naga like a phantom. Without giving Naga any chance to resist, the bone spear pierced through Naga and devoured all of his life force. With a wave of his hand, the most arrogant Naga was killed. An odd glint flashed across Han Hao's eyes. The bone spear abruptly disappeared into the center of his bone throne. Those God Hunters who had previously said that they would put aside their prejudices and fight Han Hao together were all dumbfounded. They looked at Han Hao in fear and did not know what to do for a moment. "I didn't come here to become your commander." Han Hao glanced at these people who were silent like cicadas in the winter and said, "However, I will appoint a new commander for all of you. From today onwards, all hegemons in the Wind Dominion will listen to my commands." As soon as he finished speaking, Han Hao casually pointed at a person and said, "You're the new commander." After a short pause, Han Hao said, "Any other questions?" Silence. No one spoke. Han Hao nodded, looked at the God Hunter he had pointed out, and said, "I will give you 1 month to reorganize all the God Hunters in the Dominion of Wind. I will stay here for a month. If you encounter any resistance, you can report to me." I will kill anyone who dares to disobey. Silence. Silence again. Get to work, Han Hao said impatiently after waving his hand. None of the so-called God Hunter leaders in the Valley of Wind Howl dared to object. They left after being reprimanded by Han Hao. When they saw the sudden influx of God Hunters in the Valley of Wind Howl, they felt even more terrified. Polo, keep an eye on him, ordered Han Hao coldly as he glanced at Polo, who was not far away from him. I will. I think they will do their job obediently, said Polo with a bow and a nod before he quietly left. In less than half a month, all the God Hunter hegemons in the Valley of Wind Howl were reorganized under Han Hao's insufferably domineering authority. During that time, Han Hao did not personally take action. Anyone who disobeyed his orders was dealt with by Polo and his subordinates. Han Hao, who was in the middle of a cave in the Valley of Wind Howl, did not take a single step out of the cave. He was painstakingly comprehending the energy of the quintessence. Just as Han Hao was about to move on to his next target, Han Shuo arrived at the Valley of Wind Howl with Dana. They easily found Han Hao, who was cultivating hard. Father, why are you here? Asked the little skull Han Hao, who had always been insufferably arrogant in front of his subordinates, with a joyful smile on his face. How is it? Have you comprehended the energy of the quintessence? Asked Han Shuo smilingly after he arrived at the little skull. I have been trying to use the energy of the quintessence all these years, but I'm still not very adept at it. My ability to use the energy of the quintessence is far inferior to that of Nestet and the others, replied Han Hao. I'm here this time to talk to you about the quintessence. Before I came here, I went to the Darkness Dominion and made an appointment with Nestet, Gurado, and Amphalos. I learned some things about the quintessence from them. Han Shuo told Little Skull about the conversation he had with the 3 quintessence overgods in the Darkness Dominion. He then said in a deep voice, I'm worried that you will lose control of the quintessence when you burn up all the quintessence shards, so it's best that you start gathering the power of faith during this time. According to Nestet and the others, the maintenance of the quintessence required the help of the power of faith, as well as the cleansing of the ocean of faith. There were many restrictions. Little Skull might not need the power of faith for the time being because he had the quintessence shards. However, once he burned up all the quintessence shards, he would need the power of faith to sustain the quintessence. Without the power of faith, the quintessence would wipe out his divine soul and choose a new master. After learning this secret from Nestet and the others, Han Shuo decided not to return to the fringe for the time being. He immediately went to talk to Han Hao. Although Little Skull Han Hao was not in the fringe, he would send messages to the fringe from time to time. Therefore, Han Shuo knew Little Skull Han Hao's whereabouts. However, in order to prevent their conversation from being heard by others, Han Shuo did not use any other means of communication with Little Skull. He only contacted Little Skull face to face to avoid any unnecessary trouble. Father, my situation seems to be different from what you said. Little Skull listened attentively to Han Shuo. He knitted his brows and pondered in silence for a long time before he spoke. Different? Han Shuo was surprised. His interest was piqued. He asked, how so? My quintessence seems to be formed from the fusion of the quintessence of death and the demonic arts I cultivate. Now that the quintessence shard is gone, I don't feel that it needs the power of faith. Not only that, the quintessence is constantly releasing energy into my divine soul and body. It seems to be strengthening me at all times. Little Skull thought for a moment before he told his father what he felt. What? Han Shuo was shocked. He looked deeply at Han Shuo with a bewildered expression. After a long while, Han Shuo smiled bitterly and said, Then I don't know what's going on. It's really strange. Could it be that your quintessence is different from Nestet's and doesn't need the power of faith to support it? I don't know. I don't feel any binding force from this quintessence. On the contrary, it seems to be helping me to become stronger and stronger. Han Hao looked delighted. He said, if I meet Nestet now, even if I can't defeat him, he won't be able to kill me. Han Shuo smiled bitterly. He knew that Little Skull would never lie to him. In other words, he had absolute confidence in fighting Nestet and the others. During the trip to the Darkness Dominion, he was powerless against Amphalos. He wasn't even a match for Amphalos. According to Han Hao, Little Skull was even stronger than him. "Show me your strength." After muttering to himself for a while, Han Shuo suddenly laughed. He glanced at Donna, who'd come in with him, and said in a gentle voice, "Go out for a while, you'll be caught in the crossfire." Donna nodded with a wry smile and left gracefully. Listening to the conversation between Han Shuo and his son, she knew that their strength had far surpassed that of the commoners on Elysium. Although Elysium was vast, perhaps only the 12 quintessence overgods could pose a threat to the father and son. Donna knew very well what a quintessence overgod meant. If 2 quintessence overgods were to fight, even the slightest shockwave could obliterate her and destroy her soul. Donna deeply felt the gap between herself and Han Shuo. After Donna left, the father and son saw that the cave was sealed. Then, Little Skeleton carefully made his move. As soon as the bone spear appeared, the energy of violence, despair, death, and boundless resentment was released. Those energies gathered on the bone spear. The bone spear gently rotated, and even space itself seemed to be torn apart, revealing dazzling specks of light. Han Shuo slowly closed his eyes as he sensed the energy from the bone spear. After a long time, he gently nodded and said to Little Skeleton, "Your energy is very special. It is based on the energy of death in this world. Using the profound understanding of the soul of the energy of death and the comprehension of the soul of demonic arts, you gather all the negative energy in the instant before the death of all living beings and unleash it." Little Skull Han Hao had always lacked a true understanding of his own power. He listened attentively to Han Shuo's explanation and asked, "Father, are you saying that this is the energy that is released by the soul before the death of a living being, a special energy formed between life and death?" Nodding, Han Shuo opened his eyes and frowned. "This is actually an elemental energy. Before every living being completely disappears, there would still be a portion of their energy drifting between the heavens and the earth. If a person who dies of old age or sickness dies normally, they would die very peacefully since they knew their fate. A peaceful death would not produce too much special energy. However, this energy of yours is a little extreme. It is the energy of the heavens and the earth produced by those who die abnormally. Those who die abnormally would be filled with fear, hatred, despair, violence, slaughter, and madness. These energies are truly the most evil energy in the world. You are very lucky to be able to use these energies to form a new quintessence." After hesitating for a moment, Han Shuo put on a bitter smile and said, "You're the only one who can make use of this energy to form a quintessence. Due to your unique life form, if it were any other god, their divine soul wouldn't be able to withstand so much negative energy. They would have perished before their quintessence could form." "Father, what should I do?" Little Skull asked in shock after listening to Han Shuo's explanation for a while. "I don't know. I keep feeling that the formation of your quintessence is too smooth." Han Shuo looked up at the sky, his mind full of doubts. According to Nestet and the others, the mother goddess of creation had only bestowed a total of 12 quintessences. However, Little Skull's quintessence was formed by himself. However, Nestet and the others had lived for so many years, and they had never seen anyone who could form a new quintessence. Could it be related to the demonic arts that he cultivated? Han Shuo guessed. Chapter 1007. Han Shuo and Donna did not stay too long in the wind-howling valley. After discussing the issue of the quintessence with Little Skull, Han Shuo discovered that the quintessence formed by Little Skull seemed to be different from the other 12 overgods. He stopped giving Little Skull too much advice and let him experience the power of the quintessence on his own. Han Shuo's avatar did not immediately return to the fringe with Donna. Instead, he accompanied Donna on a leisurely sightseeing tour, leaving Donna to make arrangements for the time being. At present, Han Shuo's avatar had nothing to worry about other than the fact that his energy could not be completely fused. Without finding a way to fuse the energy of the 13 elements, Han Shuo would not be able to advance any further. Therefore, with his main body still in the pandemonium, Tanai was able to advance by leaps and bounds while this avatar stayed to accompany Dana. Although Han Shuo could not be overly intimate with Dana due to his special body, Dana felt that she was still very happy to have him by her side. Being able to hold Han Shuo's hand and stroll through the beautiful scenery filled Dana with more satisfaction than anything else. Having been on Elysium for so many years, Han Shuo's activities were limited to the dominions of darkness, death, and space, as well as the fringe. Han Shuo had never been to most of the 12 dominions on Elysium. Although he knew the general situation of Elysium through some sources, he did not know the specifics. Now that there was plenty of time, even if the war on Elysium officially began, it would not be as intense as before. Only the dominions of death, destruction, darkness, life, light, and water had yet to participate in the war. Even for the 6 dominions that participated in the war was not as intense as it seemed. The Battle of the Gods was not over yet, so it was too early to talk about the opening of the Sky Castle. Moreover, even if the Battle of the Gods was over, it was almost impossible for Han Shuo to break through the Sky Castle if his physical strength had not broken through to the Demon Lord realm. Therefore, he still had to wait for a while. Now that Han Shuo was in the mood to travel around the 12 divine dominions, he put down his heavy burden and accompanied Dana to wander around many places. He was very satisfied. Meanwhile, far away in the pandemonium in the land of chaos, Han Shuo continued to temper his fleshly body. He was borrowing the energy gathered by the 9th realm mystical Een Harvester in an attempt to undergo a complete transformation. In a quiet courtyard in the pandemonium, Rose, who had long silver hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, sat quietly on a stone bench. She looked at the small flowing water in front of her and the vibrant plants that filled the pavilion with a lonely expression. The quiet Rose exuded a coldness that kept people at arm's length. Suddenly, someone stepped into the quiet courtyard and broke Rose's peace. Rose, who was focused on the small bridge and the flowing water in front of her, glanced at Romont, who walked over casually. She looked at his special body formed by absorbing rare metals and furrowed her brows. She asked, "Romont, what are you doing here? Your body seems to have changed again." Romont laughed and said, "I went to look for Han Jin a while ago. Andrina happened to be there as well. I wanted to ask the two of them about my recent abnormalities. I didn't expect that Han Jin and Andrina would join hands and beat me up. But my body feels really good after getting beaten up. My body's toughness has reached a whole new level. I really want them to beat me up every day." Rose was astounded. She stared blankly for a while before she recalled that both Han Jin and Andrina had special powers in their bodies. Romont's body would definitely benefit greatly if he could add some of the metal properties that Han Jin and Andrina had. "Romont, your current realm is a little strange. Do you know what realm your strength is at?" Rose asked after thinking for a while. "I don't know how to divide my current realm. But I met Salus a while ago. I tried to sneak attack Salus. After I was discovered, Salus didn't know it was me. He didn't hold back and attacked me ruthlessly. I took Salus's lightning attack head-on. After that, I found out that I wasn't injured at all. I recovered after a few days of recuperation," said Romont proudly. Rose flicked her white hair and said in amazement, "Salus is at the realm of a Lord God. His all-out attack actually couldn't injure you. Romont, you're very strong now." Romont laughed heartily and said, "I had to fight Salus later. His lightning power had no effect on my body. It could only numb my spirit. That's why I couldn't win. But even so, Salus had a headache. I really don't know why Brian is so powerful. He only changed my body slightly and I experienced such a huge change." After hesitating for a while, Romont said to Rose gratefully, "It's all thanks to you bringing Lord Brian to me. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'd still be sitting in that swamp, looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. I wouldn't be able to reach my current realm even after 1,000 years." Upon hearing about Han Shuo, Rose put on a rather disappointed look. She said indifferently, "I haven't seen him for many years after he went underground. Although I've also reached late-stage high god, the difference between us is like heaven and earth. Rose's words were filled with helplessness and bitterness. Back then, when Han Shuo first went to the Demon Mountain, he had no choice but to run for his life. But now, after a few decades, he was able to defeat her. And now, Han Shuo had become an existence on par with an overgod of quintessence. The gap between the two was growing wider and wider. Back in the Darkness Dominion, Rose was the only high god by Han Shuo's side. The two spent a lot of time together. Rose recalled the time when she and Han Shuo wreaked havoc in Hushvale City and forced Hoffs to suffer. She also recalled the time they spent together on the journey from the Darkness Dominion to the Fringe. Now, Rose's enemies had long been killed by Han Shuo, and the Fringe, which was known as the most chaotic place on Elysium, had been conquered by Han Shuo. Han Shuo's grand promise to Rose had come true. But she found that the gap between her and Han Shuo was growing wider and wider. This made Rose very disappointed. Sometimes, she even regretted bringing Han Shuo to the Fringe. Rose would think that if Han Shuo wasn't so powerful, perhaps the gap between them wouldn't be growing wider and wider. With that thought in mind, Rose couldn't help but look down at the ground beneath her feet. She wondered what Han Shuo was doing in the secret chamber. "Rose, come here." Suddenly, a voice sounded in the depths of her divine soul. Rose turned pale with fright. She immediately realized that it was Han Shuo's voice. She stood there blankly, not knowing what to do. "What's wrong?" Roman couldn't help but ask when he saw her in a daze. "He's looking for me. He's looking for me." Rose couldn't hide her surprise and excitement. After saying those words, she hastily headed towards the underground tunnel, ignoring Roman's strange expression. Chapter 1008. Rose's excitement was undisguised. She did not expect that she would behave so differently from her usual nonchalant self. Roman looked on in astonishment as she hurried away. It took him a while to react. He looked down at the tunnel leading to the Pandemonium and mumbled to himself, "I'm afraid Tanai is the only one who can use his divine sense to communicate directly." Roman had been in the Pandemonium for quite some time now. He knew how powerful Han Shuo was. Ever since Han Shuo killed Jar in one fell swoop more than a decade ago, everyone in the Pandemonium had realized just how powerful Han Shuo was. For example, the 5 elite zombies, Sanguiner, and other core members of the Han family, Han Shuo had always used his divine sense to communicate with them. Roman had more or less heard about this. When he saw that Rose was talking to herself excitedly, he guessed that Han Shuo must have used his divine sense to communicate with her. Rose's surprised expression gave him more ideas in his mind. "Come with me to the center of the underground palace." Just as Roman's imagination was running wild, a piece of consciousness suddenly flashed directly in his divine soul. He was taken aback and subconsciously turned his head to look around. When he found that there was no one around, he suddenly understood. "What's the matter?" Roman was not used to communicating with others in such a way. It took him a while to figure out how to communicate with his divine sense. "We're talking about the battle of the gods," Han Shuo replied. Roman asked no more questions and followed behind Rose into the underground tunnel. He was secretly amazed as he did not know how Han Shuo could directly enter his divine soul to send messages. Suddenly, Roman felt a chill in his heart as he thought of another possibility. Since he could directly transmit a message to his divine soul, if he used this kind of power to attack his divine soul, wouldn't he be unknowingly attacked? With that thought in mind, Roman felt a little fearful as he approached the underground palace. He suddenly realized that even if Han Shuo didn't face him head-on, he could destroy his divine soul in an instant with a direct attack on his divine soul. Such an attack was too horrifying. It meant that as long as Han Shuo wanted to kill someone, no one within range of his senses would be able to escape. Unless, of course, he could stop Han Shuo's formless soul energy from attacking him. Roman knew that he didn't have the strength to do so, and he didn't think that Tanai and many others could do it. In fact, this was indeed the case. Over the years, as Han Shuo's consciousness had improved by leaps and bounds, His consciousness had once again gained a miraculous power in the Demon Lord realm. Now, with Han Shua's consciousness, the entire fringe would be reflected in his consciousness. Using the power of his consciousness, Han Shua could deal a fatal blow to any living being that he could sense. As long as his consciousness was in range, no one would be able to escape from his attack. In other words, if Han Shua wanted someone dead in the fringe, he wouldn't even need to leave the fringe. As long as he had the thought, that person would be annihilated in body and soul. Rose was overjoyed. She walked to the center of the underground palace and saw Sanguiner, the 5 elite zombies, Phoebe, Emily, and the other members of the Han family. But her face turned a little gloomy. She thought that Han Shua had asked her to come alone, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Soon enough, more and more important figures of Tanai arrived from all over the place. Stadholm the Old Monster, Ermite Cotton, and the other core members of the Han family had gazes as sharp as lightning. It appeared that they had all made rapid progress over the years. All these years, the members of the Han family had been cultivating diligently in Tanai. In Tanai, where the elemental energy was dozens of times richer than anywhere else, and with the arcane orbs and divine energy potions that Han Shua had bestowed upon them, even the most mediocre of people would make rapid progress, not to mention these geniuses of profound continent. Gradually, all the core members of the Han family had gathered. They were very familiar with each other and were enthusiastically discussing Tanai's recent movements. They were also curious as to why Han Shua, who had been in seclusion in the fringe, would summon them. Everyone knew that Han Shua must have something important to announce, and that was the focus of their discussion. However, as they had been cultivating on their own, they did not know the specifics of what was going on. Therefore, they were all very curious as to why Han Shua, who had been in seclusion all this time, would summon them. Just as the crowd was discussing spiritedly, the space at the center of the vast and boundless hall suddenly distorted. A dim light flashed and vanished, and Han Shua abruptly appeared. Han Shua smilingly looked at the crowd who were still whispering to each other. Shortly after, he let out a light cough. After the light cough, everyone calmed down and looked at Han Shua in astonishment. After staring blankly for a moment, many greeted Han Shua, especially the 5 elite zombies, Sanguiner, Phoebe, and Emily. Some of them even seemed a little resentful. Gilbert even said that it had been a long time since they last saw him. Han Shua gestured for the crowd to quiet down. The crowd quietened down again. Shortly after, Han Shua smilingly said, "Let's sit down and talk." The spacious hall was filled with stone benches and chairs of all sizes. After everyone was seated, Han Shua said, "I have gathered all of you here to tell you something. Back then I said that we would not participate in the battle of the gods. But now, I know that this is no longer up to us. Since it is unavoidable, we can only prepare in advance." Upon hearing Han Shua mention the battle of the gods, the crowd immediately became solemn. No one dared to speak carelessly anymore. Although only the 6 divine territories were participating in the War of the Gods, and the battle was still on a small scale, the War of the Gods in the past had never ended so easily. Many people would die in each War of the Gods. This War of the Gods would most likely be no exception. Back then, when Han Shua did not participate in the Battle of the Gods, the crowd did not pay much attention to it. But now that they heard that Han Shua was going to participate, their expressions turned grave. The Battle of the Gods this time will be even more tragic than the previous ones. Han Shua knitted his brows and warned them in advance. Other than the dominions of death, darkness, destruction, life, light, and water, the rest of the dominions will have to avoid participating as well. There will always be people who will perish in this battle. Even the dominions of destiny and space can't avoid it. Goran asked in astonishment. As a native god of Elysium, he had obviously heard too much about the battle of the gods. He more or less knew what had happened on Elysium in the past few battles of the gods. The dominions of destiny and space had always been neutral parties. There was one time when the dominions of space had secretly made some moves, but the dominions of destiny had never participated in the battle of the gods. Instead, they had acted as mediators. Han Shuo nodded and said, "That's right, no one will be able to escape. This battle of the gods will be more tragic than any of the previous battles of the gods." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.